Testing. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a wonderful 4th of July. We'll talk about that in a second. But in the meantime, this is Beer Blather 279. Big Bad Wolf is here. The Big Bad Wolf Bill is the law of the land, with the results we anticipated down to the wire, but not before narcissistic nincompoops and worthless snake oil salesmen and women gave their all in an elaborate Kabuki play to fool the boobs into pretending they are relevant. There was a time, long ago, when debating Congress actually had a meaning. The reduction of the senators into the same variety of mountbanks we already had in the House, but with a longer term, and then turning oh, them all into reality TV stars with the advent of C-SPAN and the 24-hour news cycle did the rest. A Springer show on steroids. Chronicles of foul-ups foretold, where the whips are more important than reason, logic, honesty, or duty. Nobody would dare defy their meal ticket, and nobody did. The big bad wolf of the Democrats so feared to the point of wetting their pants, is here. They did not fear it because it leaves our good citizens deprived of health care. It does not. Or government giveaways. Alas, it does not. Or because it explodes the deficit. It sure as hell does not. And the debt they never care about anyway. You got it. It does not. It scares them shitless because it sacrificed every sacred cow, from the climate scam to the illegal crisis to the big bonfire of the idiocies, and opens the way for what might well become the steepest expansion of our economy since the 1950s. Hold on to your britches. We're about to take off. Peace through strength, growth, and prosperity are just around the corner. And this is Sol Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information from my golden cage in Florida. And my friend on that side, Thomas Victor, the only living expert in World War I flamethrowers and commentator extraordinaire. How are you, Thomas? Are you living in fear
Well, I'm
crouched
actually
in your desk because of all the federal soldiers roaming the streets of LA?
I told you, in order for my brother and I to end up getting Medicare, we're going to have to prove, despite being American citizens, that we're actually residents of America, the United States. And we're going to have to do it face to face with somebody in the Social Security office. And, it's a pain in the butt. If I were pulled over by ICE right now, theoretically, depending on how, what's the word? Depending on how dutiful the ICE agents were, I could theoretically end up on a plane to Caracas, but I don't care. In my town, traffic is down by 90%. And the traffic before was so heavy that backing out of your driveway, you often had to wait for cross traffic. And you had to wait for 4 or 5 cars. Now, at the end of my street, there's a 4-lane street. I go down and I make my perfunctory stop sign stop, and then I just go. I always look, but now I don't have to look because there's never traffic coming from the left. And last night, July 4th, not a single stadium-sized illegal Mexican mortar went off.
Wow.
Plenty of illegal fireworks. Fireworks are illegal in the city.
Yep.
So there are plenty of illegal fireworks, but there were none of the ones that shook my house.
Not the bazookas.
And, exactly. And so this is the first time in over 20 years that there wasn't a single massive explosion. All those came from Mexico, and they were all brought up illegally by people who couldn't leave the old country behind in their hearts. And the people next door, they stopped shooting fireworks. They got bored at 10 o'clock at night. Most people did. By the time midnight rolled around, there were just a few little, and that was it. Everybody got bored because.
But that was the beat.
Well, if you think about it, it's pretty boring to spend 3 hours blowing up skyrockets.
Oh yeah.
I mean, if you do it once or twice, okay. But in the past, they used to do it for, 5 hours. And that's because the people doing it were from a country where their culture, a lot of them, is very primitive. And they have you ever seen the sledgehammer explosive ceremony somewhere in Mexico where they have sledgehammers and they tie these wads of something on the end of the sledgehammer that will explode on through kinetic contact, and they have each celebrant has a steel plate that he puts on the ground, and then he hits the sledgehammer on it and it blows up. And I can't think of anything.
Wise.
Well, it's the videos. It's just this whole series of endless explosions. Nobody's cheering. Nobody's drinking. Nobody's doing anything. They're just making loud noise. And
I imagine the odd Mexican boy. Look, man, no fingers, no fingers.
Well, there was a viral video where some guy doubled the size, and he did it, and he ended up doing a backflip. And I imagine that these guys aren't wearing any ear protection, so they're all deaf. But life is better in my city since the crackdowns by ICE, and that's just reality. I know that the state has dedicated its entire existence to coddling and paying for illegal aliens, but the long arm of the federal government is reaching into this state, and they're all going home. There was a raid somewhere where they surrounded the entire building and they deported every single person in the building. That's like such a Trumpian move.
Yes. Who would have thunk that solving the LA traffic jams was going to be a mass deportation event?
Yeah. I mean,
now you can probably even use the freeways.
Well, see, okay, my parents lost a car because an illegal alien Mexican door-to-door soup salesman stopped his car in the street with the engine running while he went across the street with his bowl of soup. And his son, who was maybe 5, crawled into the driver's seat, and he put the car in drive. The car went over about 3 lawns, and it plowed into my parents, doing 30, 40 miles an hour. And my parents' car was shaped like a C. And so the guy came racing down, and he burst into tears, and he said, please don't call La Migra on me. And he had no money, so he couldn't replace the car. His only argument...
Insurance.
No insurance, of course. Mm. And my parents, they just ate the cost. They let him go. And my brother Tim was there, and he was going to have a stroke with rage. This guy, he was telling him this, he's going to do it again. Don't you understand? Well, we just don't want to be mean to him, and he's working really hard, and it's like, no, he needs to be arrested and then deported. But there was no getting through to them. They just didn't want the responsibility of pressing charges against this guy. And I would have called the cops in a second. I would have called the feds.
I remember the days when I was like your parents. And I wasn't opposed to La Migra raiding a restaurant and taking everybody but the owner. But I didn't want to be the one to point to this guy and take him
Yeah.
out. Kind of like, I used to go to the last store in New York City that sold live chickens for food. It was on West Broadway at Broome Street. And I remember I take a friend once and I go to pick my chickens and, I'd like to buy one. I say, sure, which one? And you go, that one over there. And my friend looks at me and says, you go, that one? And that's the one they kill? Yes, son of a bitch. How can you do that? I say, you're going to eat it, asshole. When you pick it up in the supermarket, what do you think? It was born that way? And one day, it dawned on me that in this particular issue is no different. Illegal immigration exploits our goodness. It exploits people like your parents or like I used to be that will have compassion for the individual, even when we philosophically may oppose the collective. Bullshit. Don't try with me now. I'll point out to the son of a bitch. I'll take him to the cops myself if I can.
Well, see, the guy's immigration status wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was so irresponsible that he allowed his small child to get in the car and drive and destroy somebody else's car.
There's more, and tomorrow it'll be somebody else's car or my friend. He was like a brother to me, Aziz. We worked together at Arrow Air. We a friendship spanning 3 decades. And one day he's going home from Miami Airport, and an illegal from Venezuela driving a car like a fucking maniac on the Palmetto Express cut him off, sent him into a ditch, and he drowned.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we tolerating people like that Venezuelan illegal driving like a fucking maniac without a license or insurance or even a conscience?
Well, the leftist argument is that we already have our own illegal, or we have our own drunk drivers, so let's not.
We do.
And the argument is, so what if these people are illegal? Well, it's like, okay, we're importing more drunk drivers.
Right.
Illegally.
We're doubling the population of drunk drivers on the road, asshole.
Exactly. So
and the fact that they have no license, no knowledge, no ability to read traffic signs, and no insurance makes it even worse.
Yeah. No,
they ruin the lives of working people every day here in Florida.
I've never had sympathy for illegals. I remember in 2006, I think it was, when we almost passed amnesty twice in
2006.
George W. Bush was known as a guy who all you had to do was tell him your sob story about being illegal, and he would burst into tears, and it's because he was raised by his illegal alien nanny, apparently. And she told him stories about people marching across the desert. And so I remember the radio host Michael Medved saying that the illegal aliens were a perfect conservative demographic. and that if we legalize them, we would have shitloads more Republican voters. Well,
Could be.
I disagree, because to be in this country illegally, you have to be committing so many more crimes. You almost certainly have a fake ID.
Yep.
You have fake insurance. You have a fake social security number. You're what we would do by legalizing all these people is we would create an entire cohort of American criminals who didn't speak English and who were completely adept at breaking multiple American laws.
And who just learned that crime pays.
Exactly. These people next door to me, they were always legal from the beginning. They're on the woman who owns the house now is the third generation, and I just discovered she doesn't speak Spanish. And there are occasional parties, but there used to be parties every weekend. And when she's had enough, she comes out and yells at everybody in English to shut it down. So, like the fireworks, she shut down the fireworks at 10 o'clock at night. She'd had enough. And the coarse laughter and the loud the noise and all of that, it's all gone away. This is now an American family, and they came here. The point is,
no more 14-year-olds preaching norteño corridos.
There's almost no music ever. They used to have chickens. They used to have geese. At one point, they had a goat. All of that is gone now. And the woman who her mother had her at 16. And so her mother is only 16 years older than her. Her mother was a 32-year-old grandmother. And the woman who owns the house now, she's not overweight. And when you look at her, you think American. You don't think Mexican. When you look at her mother, you just, for whatever reason, you think Mexican. But when you look at the woman who now runs the house, you think American. And there's just something different about legal assimilated Central and South Americans.
Oh, yeah.
They're just different. And Michael Medved was completely wrong that legalizing however many million illegals it was at the time, those people were not in any way conservative. On the other hand, the people who came here legally, what did Trump get in the last election? What percentage of Latinos did he get? It was high.
It was nearly 50%.
Exactly. So,
which for a conservative is very high.
Very high. And I saw a great, there's a photo of Trump standing on his balcony on the 4th, and there's this enormous display of fireworks, and he's got his hands out. He's shot from behind. And whoever posted the picture, they wrote, think how bad the Democrats feel that every time Trump walks outside his door, he creates another iconic image. And it's true. He's creating these iconic images all over the place. And there's nobody on the other side who can equal him. It's really an astonishing thing that you and I were talking about. You told me his name. I forgot his name before we went on the air. Who was it? Pritzker? Fitzker?
No, Kissinger, that freaking imbecile.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
He said that he wasn't seeing ICE rounding up illegal Russians. So before we went on the air, I looked it up. Illegal Russians make up about 1% of all the illegal aliens in this country. So,
For every 100 others, you get one Russian. And by the way, around here, when we have a shit ton of Russians, Ukrainians, Bosnians, eh, they've been catching them too. Eh, but the problem with Kissinger is that his suggestion was that they weren't deporting illegal Russians because they're white. And ICE is concentrating on brown people. Well, I have bad news for that racist scumbag. Not all Russians are white, and not all South Americans are brown, idiot. Since they don't have an argument on the reasonableness of sending stowaways back to where they came from, he tries to change the narrative to racism. They're not being thrown out of the country because they're white, brown, or purple with yellow polka dots. They're being thrown out of the country because they're here illegally, you fucking asshole.
well, also, in order to manage these people, the vast majority of the ICE agents who are handling them, they're all South American of South American origin. Have you ever heard ICE agents speaking Spanish? They sound
Yes,
like they're natives.
well, many of them are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I know a shit ton, and they are naturalized, but they're not even second generation. They're first generation from all over the place.
Exactly. So this notion, okay, it always used to bug me. I saw some movie, and it was about the world's greatest expert in serial killers, and she was talking about serial killers in America. You know, they're white. They're the overwhelming majority of them are white men between the ages of 18 and 46. This movie was made 30 years ago. Then, even more so than now, the reason there's so many white male serial killers and school shooters and et cetera, is because the majority of the population is white people, and half of that majority are white males. So you pick any field, and the majority is going to be white males. But
Yes.
it was made out to sound as if there was something in white males that made them become serial killers.
Yeah, what I've noticed, there was a spat not long ago. Remember the Korean little shit that killed 36, I think it was, at Virginia Tech,
Yes.
2010 maybe.
Yep.
There was a spat of Chinese and Korean serial killers, uh, who I know percentage-wise is higher than any other species. Uh, but the point is, too, it's completely aleatory.
It's what? Say it again.
It's completely aleatory. If a Tibetan were to charge and kill 6 people, it would be like 40% of the Tibetan population in that town.
Well, I actually looked up using the FBI statistics who racially as a percentage of the population commits the most mass shootings. Number one, Asians. Number two, Native Americans. Number three, blacks. Number four is whites.
Right.
So Asians make up something like 3% of the population. And as a percentage of the population, they commit the most mass shootings as a number of them here.
Right.
And the most dangerous group in the United States in terms of the violent crimes they commit are male to female or female or transsexuals. There are so few transsexuals.
The little
so
guys
many
that
of
went on the
them-
murder spree. Then we have a couple
Exactly.
of those that went on the murder spree from California to Vermont.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Recently.
but if you said that transsexuals are the most dangerous group in the United States, you would you would create a firestorm of protest.
Yeah,
But
well,
if statistically they are,
let, let me create the firestorm. When you start with a paranoid, delusional psychopath who's willing to cut off his balls, you have a problem. It's a serial
well,
killer waiting to happen.
the big bad the big bad bill was passed, became law. And one of the reasons that all the Republicans in the House voted for it is because there's been a sea change in our culture. Beginning, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, there was a transsexual who would go to restaurants and film himself being misgendered. He says he's a woman.
I
And
remember
so
that.
the waiter would say, "Yes, sir." And then he would call the manager over. This person,
Come me, sir.
well, this person started filming himself in women's bathrooms, and somebody filed a lawsuit, and he's shut down his entire social media presence. He's gone. And, he violated Florida laws. So he still
But
could be
by the way,
facing jail time.
I don't care who you are. You don't start filming inside a woman's bathroom in Florida.
Well, exactly. It's, and so the zeitgeist has changed. And the Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, I remember the Freedom Caucus was going to stop the bill. And right before the final vote, all the Republicans got together and took a picture with big smiles on their faces, and they voted for it.
Of
And
course, we cannot underestimate the efforts of Thune and
Johnson,
Johnson, who put the balls of these Freedom Caucus morons in a vice and made
absolutely.
them know in no unclear terms that you vote with the party or you're out of it.
Well, wasn't
Period.
J.D. Vance had to break the tie in the Senate, but Murkowski
Yes,
was she was the last vote for the Republicans.
yes.
Remember, she was claiming she wasn't going to vote for it,
No,
and she did.
she saw Jesus. No, who are the ones who didn't vote for it? Well, Tilly's that fucking asshole who's going to vote no to everything for the rest of his life because he's already out.
Mm-hmm.
We lost leverage on him. He's gone. At the end of his term, he's going to walk into the sunset and join the bleeding choir of Democrats in hell. And people like him, like Massey. Massey probably knows he's already toast. All he's got left is posturing.
Mm-hmm.
But barring that, which is like 3 in the Senate and 2 in the House, the rest of them fell in line. And it is historic. It's been so difficult for Republicans, time after time after time, to herd that uh, 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 those feral cats to
Mm-hmm.
do anything in unison, and this time they did.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't be more opportune. I'm in love with the big bad wolf of a bill. It doesn't have everything I want. What does? Some things were taken out that I think was a mistake. There is enough pandering in there for a generation. But what's good in it, it's so fucking good that makes me forget the things that could have and didn't. There's got to be time for that. More. With this bill fully implemented, it's going to be easier to go forward. We're talking about illegal immigration. There's something like 46 billion for the wall, 46 billion for ICE that covers anything from more personnel to training to weapons to what have you. There is more money for a string of alligator Alcatrazes around the country. This gives ICE and Border Patrol the tools they need to make sure the border stays closed and make sure the miscreants are thrown back over it.
You know
And
what I think? Huh?
yeah,
You know what I think really helped Trump? I think people are so on another planet and they're so primitive. I think the fact that Trump destroyed the Iranian nuclear program, I think that made people afraid enough of him, including in our government, to start cooperating, because that was something that most people thought would never happen, especially given that so many of the alleged Trump supporters like Tucker Carlson were telling us that tens of thousands of Americans were going to die if we did that, and you know, the gates of hell would be opened. And I think politicians are like dogs, and I think they respect force, and they respect strength, and they respect the ability to give the order to blow up another country's nuclear programs. And Trump, I think, sort of acknowledged that by having the B-2 bomber fly over the White House, you know. And
wasn't that beautiful?
he very, oh yeah. I learned a lot about the B-2 bombers that I didn't know before, such as the fact that the crew has to be kept in dark rooms for hours before they get in their planes, and you know, they have to wear night vision goggles when they're in the cockpit, and you know, just the sheer physical effort required. What was it, a 36-hour round trip or something outrageous like that? And you know, there's so much. Okay, I've seen several economic experts go on CNN and MSNBC and tell them that the passage of this bill already means that Trump has a successful presidency. And boy, CNN and MSNBC, they don't want to hear about that.
You know, that's what I was going to say. Trump doesn't have to go back to Congress for a fucking dime to implement his border policy or
Yep.
the repatriation of illegals. That's not the only thing. As of today, my money is not going to pay for abortions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought, and we've had this discussion before, and I don't consider myself an extremist in any shape or
No.
form, and I'm more tolerant than the average viewer here. Eh, but I always thought that forcing me and people who oppose abortion at large to pay for abortions out of their own pocket, to have the government force us, put a gun on our head, and force us to pay for abortions, which is the only way I can describe raising taxes from us to give it to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that is grotesque.
I agree. I do not oppose all abortions. I oppose abortions after the first trimester.
Yeah.
But in the end, I do want to leave it up to the woman and her doctor. I supported the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and if a woman in a state that doesn't allow abortions really wants her abortion, there's other states she can go to, and
You can go to California.
well, there's multiple charities that will pay for her trip.
Yeah.
And I never liked my taxpayer money going to paying for abortions.
I think it's intrinsically immoral.
Exactly. And the fact that abortion had become a sacrament and it was what's the term, an event that women underwent to prove that they were true women. They got their first abortion, that sort of thing. It was a celebration, and congratulations, you're now one of us. You're part of the sisterhood.
Very sick people.
Well, I lived in Tokyo for 5 years, and there are graveyards that have these little tiny statues, and people come and they put little knitted caps on them, and these are statues commemorating the souls of aborted babies. And the studies show that if a woman has 2 abortions, she will generally in her life have 2 children. The number of abortions she has will dictate the number of children she has. And the Japanese, you can't call them sentimental in terms of, sexual activity, and abortion is a purely medical procedure, and yet at the same time they have graveyards for the souls of the aborted babies. Right. So the Japanese are conflicted about the whole notion, and I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy for a society to be conflicted. I think it should never be a question of, it's just the removal of a clump of cells and that's all. Yeah. I don't think it should ever be that.
There is a lawsuit going on right now in a blue state where the person was charged with 3 murders because the woman he killed was pregnant. Mm-hmm. So let me see if I understand this. It's just a clump of cells, but this guy can be accused of murdering it. Mm-hmm. Make up your mind. If it's a clump of cells, you cannot murder it. If you can murder it, it's not just a clump of cells.
Yeah.
But that thing, like you said, that shows a kind of moral struggle as people try to resolve the issue. But my point is, where I draw the line is, I don't want to force the Sisters of Charity to assist in abortions. I don't want to force
exactly.
the people who are watching us to pay for abortions, nor do I want to pay for one myself. This big bad wolf of a bill ends government contributions to Planned Parenthoods and other abortion promoting organizations. So fuck them very much, and I'm glad to see them out of the system.
Well, the Democrats are now the party of billionaires. If they want to continue having these various things, they can go to the billionaires and ask them for donations.
Yeah,
it's
the
not
same
a problem.
People who spend millions of dollars in campaigns for abortion can give that money to Planned Parenthood and abort to their heart's content. I'm not going to be opposed to stupid Democrat women aborting, because the idea that they could be raising America's future children scares the shit out of me. But
we can't have enforced pregnancy. That's not the moral thing to do.
No.
But we also can't just say it's a clump of cells. It should be a difficult decision, and it should be something that a woman wrestles with.
Yes, because I think definitely it's not a form of birth control. It is not a rubber of last resort.
Yeah, it always bothered me when conservatives said that abortion is murder, in the way it bothers me when leftists say that capital punishment is murder.
Yep.
Neither is true. Murder is the illegal taking of lives. And in states, abortion is legal in multiple states. And by definition, it's not murder. I don't think even in states now that ban abortion, I think if a doctor performed an abortion, I don't see him or the woman going to jail being charged with murder. I don't see it happening.
And if it happened, they would see me opposing that strenuously.
Yeah. No, it's both sides have to stop arguing on emotion and have to argue on rationality. And we're seeing so much irrationality coming mostly from the left, but there are plenty of irrational conservatives who their positions can't be diagrammed. Rand Paul saying that Iran should have nuclear weapons. I mean, that's just stupid. That's just a stupid thing to say. Given their record of state-sponsored terrorism, the last thing they should have is nuclear weapons. This notion that once they have nuclear weapons, they're going to be this genial, benign leadership that will shake hands with the Jews and no, they're going to use their nuclear weapons. They've much as said so. So
in New York,
exactly.
So anyway, that was one. Another one that I enjoyed is university endowments will be paying tax now.
Say it again.
And university endowments will be paying tax now.
Mm-hmm.
And universities that do receive federal money, though I favor they receiving zero, but those that do are going to have to live by a set of rules and explain what they do with their money. And all of a sudden, the universities that persist, like Harvard, in defending racist or anti-Jew policies, might find themselves dried. Good. That's really good. I like that. Notice that all of these measures that I am describing save us money.
They save us money, and also they show people that actions have consequences. And this is a problem with American culture. We've had this problem for too long that people have been allowed to get away with things. For example, Harvard encouraging anti-Jewish protests and physical attacks on Jewish students, and then going to the federal government and saying, "Give me money."
Or Colombia promoting terrorism outright.
Yep.
Since the days Edward Said was mentoring Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So fuck them all. I like that. They also put a cap on student loans for post graduate degrees. The cap is 50 grand. I think it's far too fucking generous, and I think the government should not be in the business of guaranteeing any type of loan for deadbeats to go and get a PhD on ham sandwiches or women's status. But that's me. The blank check they had, where people run up $300,000, $400,000 in debt, is gone. Now the Democrats are complaining that $50,000 doesn't pay tuition in the average school. Bullshit. The average tuition for postgraduate studies in the U.S. is 35 grand, and that includes books, meals, and what have you. And that is for out-of-state students. In-state students pay considerably less. So
there are hundreds of thousands of students who got utterly worthless degrees and they can't find jobs, and they shouldn't be encouraged to get utterly worthless degrees that'll
on the backs of the working people of America.
Yeah.
So screw them. It's not my ideal proposition, which would have been eliminate federal guaranteed student loans altogether. If you want to get a loan, go to a fucking bank and prove your worthiness and your ability to repay. And if not, fuck off. I don't think a bank without a government subsidy will give you a fucking dime to go get a PhD in gender activism.
Well, remember the California scandal where all these rich leftists were essentially bribing the schools to take their worthless kids.
Yes.
And
Several actresses fell into that.
Yeah, there was some actress who ended up going to jail for it.
Yep.
But basically, they were taking the place of kids who would have used that space, because by all accounts, the kids who got in were like partiers, and they didn't study at all, and they went around bragging about how their parents had bribed their way into the university system. And
if you can bribe your way into the school, you can pay for your diploma.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
A system cannot be a little corrupt any more than a woman can be a little pregnant. If it is corrupted, it is corrupted, and there is no hiding it. So these people know that money will buy them graduation. So why bother? Mom will write a check. So in any case, 50 grand cap on student loans, not what I would have liked, but much better than what we have. It makes the tax cuts of 2017 permanent. Permanent.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats will have to sell the idea that we need to raise your taxes and fuck you in the ass and have people vote them for it, which under some occasions they might. But it's not going to be so easy than just waiting for the tax cuts to expire and then we get a bonanza and a huge tax hike nobody voted for. So that's good.
This is the thing that Carville said that this bill is going to lead to an extinction event among Republicans, and I don't see it. Why? There's nothing in that. The bill is not going to cause anything that will make people turn against Republicans.
No,
if anything, it's going to make.
It is, yeah. I know where you're going. Yeah, it's going to be an extinction event for Democrats.
Yeah, because the Democrats look at the guy they're promoting in New York City. I mean, this guy makes AOC look like a brain surgeon. They're promoting him with the same cult of personality crap that they did with Obama.
Yep.
And this guy is dumb. He's a dummy. He's promising free food, government-run grocery stores with fixed prices, and there's literally no money to do any of the. He defund the police completely and replace them with social workers. It's like, well, you better issue them government-issued body bags because they're going to need them
for themselves.
It's amazing,
and they have to be taught how to get into the body bag themselves to save time.
Yeah. Yeah. California and New York are these are places where the voters are in love with their politicians. Apparently, Kamala is going to run for governor here, and she's currently leading the pack. But okay, she was leading the pack for 2028, and then all of a sudden she fell off the map there. So I think it's likely that she'll fall off the map here too. But whoever the Democrats choose, they're going to be in love with them the same way they're in love with Gavin Newsom. The voters here want to go to bed with Gavin Newsom. They want to spend the night with Gavin Newsom, and that's the problem with Democrats. Yeah, exactly.
Oh God, the liver of yikes on that, man. There might be families watching this.
Well, he's got nothing going for him. He's never had anything going for him. And what
That
he's
is,
doing now is incredibly stupid. He's running to the center during the primary season. That's going to guarantee that he's not going to make it in the primary. So he doesn't even know how to run a primary. He's an idiot. But he has no chance. Everybody else on the bench, it's AOC, it's Buttigieg, it's Gavin Newsom, it's Rahm Emanuel. Talk about a blast from the past.
yeah, send him a fish wrapped in paper. By the way, Newsom probably figured out that he's so far to the left, he has to start running now to make it to the middle on time for the general. What a
Possibly.
It's not
But
going to happen.
Californians, I mean, okay, the protests against Trump and the protests against ICE have been very small here in California.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that Californian voters are wising up.
But what will a year of calm and quiet in the streets and no muggings and no rapes and and stores reopening? What will that do to California voters?
True.
I don't know. By the way, I'm not suggesting that's going to change them, but it's not wild to think that they may go for self-preservation after all.
Yep.
So that's the one. What else did I see in the big bad wolf of a bill? No taxes on Social Security. I never understood why Social Security was to begin with. It's I don't expect a lot of people to have to pay taxes on it either way, because most people on Social Security are below a threshold that when you apply the standard deduction, they pay no tax. But the standard deduction that was doubled in 17 was due to expire. And it was due to be cut in half next year. Now it's not going to happen. That is far more important than all the other bullshit. It's amazing, Some of the things nobody talks about are the ones that I think are most important. Oh, no tax on tips. Who the fuck pays tax on tips? There's got to be one or two imbeciles, borderline autistic children who pay taxes on tips because they have OCD. Nobody pays taxes on tips. Period.
Well, everything that I heard in opposition to the big bad bill, everything I heard was they were essentially either bad faith or wildly ignorant arguments. The people were just doing this. Oh God, there's some guy, some perennial protester guy, who had some giant group. I think they finally had to disband because he was corrupt. But it was the usual thing that the Republicans are allowing the national debt to go through the roof, and that we're all going to die. And Brent Bozell. Do you know him? Do you know that name?
No.
Brent Bozell.
I
think that was his name. I don't know. But anyway, Brent Bozell, yeah. I don't know, but see, what the big beautiful bill was so out of the box that all the usual arguments by the usual suspects just didn't apply. And everybody knew it. We had people, we had politicians holding out for their individual, grub, their individual, crap that they wanted to pour down their constituents' necks and all of that. But this was, as you said, it's a one-time deal, and it solves so many issues at once. And there was nothing but negativity. Nothing but negativity.
And the thing, Thomas, not only does it solve so many issues at once, it creates none. All of this bullshit about the increasing the debt by $3.5 trillion in 10 years. By the way, why is it always in 10 years? This is an old trick in the financial advisor scam around the country, which is to extrapolate into the distance to give a bigger number. If I say to you, do you want to make $100? You're going to say, I'm going to put on here. I don't have the time for you. Do you want to make $1,000? Well, for $1,000, we can talk in 10 years. That's $100 per year. Fuck it, it's the same shit. The notion, the reason they give you always, this is going to cost us so much in 10 years, this is going to increase the deficit so much in 10 years, is because they can give you a shocking number that most people don't relate and don't realize. We're being talked about a half a fucking generation. The second one is, in 10 years, so many things could happen that the entire projection is fucking meaningless. It's Malthusian. It makes no allowance for shit that may happen, like another COVID event that really doubles our deficit in 1 year, or an increase in exports that lowers the deficit enormously. It's meaningless. But there is not a single provision in the bill that increases expenses. It moves money around a little bit, and it decreases expenses by a shit ton. Over 1.2 trillion per year. That they don't talk about.
I'm looking at a chart of debt to GDP ratio.
Yeah.
The five countries with the highest debt to GDP ratio: Lebanon, 283. Lebanon, 283% of GDP. Sudan, 256%. Japan, 255%. Singapore, 168%, and Eritrea, 164%. We're in Singapore. We're in 122%, and let's see.
That is massaged, by the way.
Oh, of course, it has to be.
It has to be, because the real now is somewhere between 98 and 117.
Yeah. But looking at this map, okay, Russia is 14% of GDP.
Yeah, nobody knows.
Holy crap. Exactly.
They're going
exactly. And Japan, 255% of GDP, and yet everybody wants to do business with the Japanese.
Yeah, look at and it's a good thing we're getting into this. Look at Denmark, Belgium, Greece, Spain, industrial Europe.
Yeah, they're up there. They're well over 100%.
They're well over 100%. Some of them are 160. Some of them are 140. All of them are higher than the U.S. All of them, with a major difference that that people don't consider. These countries do not print the form of repayment. If Greece, Belgium need to pay money, they have to get the euros. They cannot print them. They have no control over that. If Russia Let's not even talk about it. If the US needs to make a payment on its debt, it does it with another bond that it prints. Our debt is 100% domestic. Theirs isn't. Big fucking difference nobody talks about. So it's really
Also,
not the problem they want you to think it is. And they resort
okay,
to all sorts of fallacies. We're, we're selling our children's future. No, we're not. You know what would be selling our children's future? Not building roads because we have to get the cash first. Stop building the Navy because until we have every single bill stashed away under the mattress, we cannot build a ship. That is stupid. No country can develop resources and infrastructure without debt.
yeah,
You know how many years the US has been free of debt since Washington took office in 1789?
no,
Actually, let's make it since we declared independence in 1776.
hmm
One fucking year in 250. I don't recall now, but I think it was 1834 or 1835. The 1 year we had no debt, not a particularly bright year either. So what's the fucking problem? But our debt increases every year. So does our GDP, asshole. So does the price of milk or a house.
well,
The house your parents bought for $13,000, I bet is a little bit more than that today.
the house, the value of this house is obscene compared to the $13,000 it was paid to build it.
Yes. So, and
So,
in the same time, the debt of the country has grown, but not nearly as much as the value of your property.
well, this is the thing that okay, they're claiming that the national debt is, uh, uh, the national debt will be 3 trillion in 10 years. But what's the GDP going to be in 10 years?
In 10 years, I'll tell you now, about 60 to 70 trillion. 60 to
Okay,
70
the highest
trillion.
point, the highest point, the largest debt as a percentage of GDP was in 1945, right at
Yep.
the end of World War II.
Imagine that.
And if you look at the graph, it's like deedle deedle deedle, deedle deedle deedle, and then COVID added a shitload to the national debt.
Shit. I mean, why? Because we stopped producing for 2 years because in this country of fucking morons, we stopped the economy for 2 years.
Yep.
And we didn't put any money into the system, essentially. We just took. So we doubled the GDP, into the debt in 2 years. That is an anomaly. That is not going to happen this year again. And as long as we are alive, I don't think it'll happen, period.
Okay, let's see. In the year 2001, we were about the lowest we've been in decades. And then the 2008 recession and then COVID, both of those.
And one more, and the war on terror.
And the war on terror.
We spent a shit ton of money after 9/11.
Yep.
And that is no different than World War II.
Yep.
So, yeah, those things are not going to happen. In the next 10 years, the GDP is going to double, like it fucking does every 10 years or so on average. And probably so will the dead.
Hmm.
Although, with a big bad wolf of a bill, we're going to take a little bite out of it. So we're probably going to go to 70 to 80% of GDP,
And
which is
Trump has
more
three
than
and a half.
comfortable for me.
Trump has 3.5 years to present us with more of his his what would you even call them? His common sense that is no longer common whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the least
What we're
common of all
getting
senses in America.
in relation to Trump, what we always get is no, 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 and it's like, but why not? And of course, there's no answer to that. Um, it's a kind of Stockholm syndrome that Americans have, where okay, I don't know if you've heard, but you know that there's a new phrase out there called the new phrase is the fatigue is real, and they're referring to a certain demographic of Americans, meaning we're tired. Carnival Cruise Lines has just published a list of behavior that will no longer be tolerated.
Good.
And there's a demographic of Americans who claim that this is directed entirely at them and that it's racist. And I would agree it is directed entirely at them, but I won't say it's racist. It's culture.
It's common sense.
When you have people, again, yes.
I don't care if you're a lily white Russian or a very dark Afro-American. There are some things that I will not tolerate when I'm on the ship with my children.
Well, this is the thing that Carnival Cruise dropped the price of its cruise, and it started getting a demographic that is driving away its long-term customers.
Yeah, they're raising prices now.
Well, they've had to, because they don't want these people anymore.
It's not worth it.
It's not working.
It's not worth it either.
It's not worth it. Yeah.
By the way, I'm taking a Carnival cruise in September with a bunch of quads. Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to join us, I think you still have time. Let me know by DM. But I'm taking a 6-day cruise with about 10 quads on in September, and it is a Carnival cruise. I've taken many. I've never had a fucking problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that and by the way, I remember one particular cruise I took out of um, South Carolina, out of Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only white person in the cruise.
Mm-hmm.
The only one. There was no problem there. There was no drinking. There was no drunkenness. It was wonderful working people having fun on a cruise. I had more fun than I had in others. And I kind of became the mascot. Here comes Whitey. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough. You have the same kind of problem coming out of New York or Miami. It's going to be a different story.
Well, that's the thing. It's entirely geographic.
It's cultural,
and it's cultural. It's geographic within geographical areas. So
yeah.
You can have a city, and in this quadrant of the city, there aren't any problems, and then in this quadrant of the city, it's hell on earth. And the thing is that again, the zeitgeist has changed. And so I mean, you can call somebody a racist all you want, and it's not going to change anything. In the past, if you called the company a racist, they would say, "Oh my God, we have to start throwing free tickets into the crowd." But now they're like,
now what they're going to do is throw assholes overboard.
Well, exactly, and it's about time, because Okay, much of the big beautiful bill, it's about actions having consequences, and this is a whole concept that the Democratic Party has tried to eliminate, that actions have consequences. And, you know, holding people responsible for their actions is somehow wrong. It's racist. It's Nazi. It's all sorts of things. And we have to return to the notion that people behave well and they do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. They're not being forced by Big Brother to do the right thing. They do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. And
Yeah.
here in California, I mean, even though the fireworks stopped at 10 o'clock, they're totally illegal. And the fireworks laws haven't been enforced in almost 20 years. They used to be enforced, but they're not enforced anymore. So when even the cops don't think that action should have consequences, what are you supposed to do?
What you're supposed to do is what you and I do usually, which is read the fucking small print.
Mm.
I'm still thinking in terms of the big bad wolf. I'm sick and tired of hearing assholes saying that it's gonna cut Medicare and leave 100 million people without insurance.
Mm.
Bullshit. Bullshit. First of all, it's saving money on one corner and putting it in another. One of the things they're putting money on is regional hospitals.
Mm.
Regional hospitals is where a majority of the population of the U.S. Is getting healthcare from, and this is going to make them more financially stable. Far from cutting access to healthcare, it's guaranteeing access to healthcare. Not one single person who qualifies for Medicare will be left without service. Not one. And notice the caveat is who qualifies for it.
Mm.
Many a panderer in California and New York are doling out Medicare like candy to illegals, to people who don't really qualify. Uh, well, that's over. And while the states pay for that, they also demand an ever increasing amount from the federal government to make up for their profligacy. Not anymore. Now the federal government is not going to give them a fucking cent above what it's absolutely required, and if they want to give healthcare to illegals, they're going to have to pay for it themselves.
Mm.
And there is no federal bailout. That's fine, and that's not going to leave Americans without healthcare. It's going to make healthcare for Americans stronger and on a more solid financial footing. So much for that canard. There are now working requirements, onerous working requirements, things people cannot do. Like if you are a healthy, able bodied, 18 to 40-year-old on the dole, you may have to work 20 hours a week. And if you
Mm.
can't get a job, volunteer. Pick up cigarette butts in a park, volunteer at an NGO, do whatever the fuck you want, but do something for 20 hours a day. How bad is that? Anybody who complains about that should complain that they have to actually be in the office to get paid at their job.
What's really funny, you hear the people talking, shrieking about all the poor people who'll be thrown off of Medicare. My brother's friend lived in California. He had a massive stroke, and he had to learn how to speak again, how to walk again, how to feed himself. how to think. He had Medi-Cal, and they put him in this hospital, and his sister came down, and she spent about a month here. And the only place that would accept him was a place where they don't change the patient's diapers. They don't essentially they don't abuse the patients in the form of punching them in the face, but they don't take care of them. And so eventually it was getting to the point where, since he was getting no physical therapy, even though it was promised, he was getting ever closer to that point where he could not recover. So my brother and the guy's sister took him back to his home in the Midwest, and my brother paid for a month's worth of his Medicare. Started on July 1st. So if he left California, he was going to have a month of no coverage anywhere.
Right.
So my brother paid for his coverage for a month before Medicare kicked in. And so they just squeaked through in that biological window where he could start getting real therapy and learn how to speak and feed and walk and do all those things. Here in California, where everybody is oh so concerned about all the poor people on Medicare, Medi-Cal their plan was to just let him rot, while the staffers just ate. They just sat at their desks and ate junk food and gained weight. And that always seems to be the case in this state. You see people going out and protesting, those teachers who kept the schools closed for 2 years, and each of them put on 80 pounds during those 2 years. There's no care for human beings in this state, not from the Democrats at any rate. And I don't know, this thing where you have somebody who's really dependent on you, and you can't be bothered to get up off your ass and do your job and give them physical therapy. I don't know. It's if I have a stroke, I'm going to get the fuck out of California. I'm not going to stay here.
No.
That's why I'm taking blood pressure medicine.
I'll take you to my home, and you'll get all the rehab you need. In Virginia,
No,
Florida, you don't have a problem with that.
I've always had normal blood pressure, and it spiked. And it spiked for 2 doctor visits. So they said, we think you should be on blood pressure medication. So I started taking it, and now it's low normal again. But, you don't want to get sick in California, not if you depend on anything Californian. I have Blue Shield California, and holy God, they made, at one point, my glaucoma medication, they told me, is now going to be $400 a month. My eye doctor ripped them a new one, and they gave it to me for a mere $80 a month. But
my most expensive copay is $1.80.
Yeah.
And I get every month a CMS with the medication I'm taking, and the total cost of the medicine, what the system paid, and what my copay is. You know what they say, that prescriptions are more expensive in the U.S. than anywhere else?
Mm.
Bullshit. The total cost that I read is lower than anywhere in Europe.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
As it turns out, I end up paying $1 per prescription. So, what's the fucking problem? Why are people squealing so hard?
Well, I'm on 6 meds, and each of them is about $1.25, and 2 of them are $80. So I can handle it. but no way am I going to Mexico.
And if you couldn't, you'd be getting it for free.
Yeah. I mean, that's true.
All you would have to do is file a financial assistance with the lab, and you start getting it for free.
Yep.
It's people, are riled up with the utterances of demagogues, and nobody actually looks up at what the reality is.
Well, see,
Speaking of reality,
this is why so many immigrants who become American citizens have no patience for Americans who do nothing but bitch about how horrible this country is.
Yeah.
I told you.
I'm sure Tucker Townsend will tell you that healthcare in Russia is so much better.
Healthcare anywhere, healthcare in Cuba, healthcare in Vietnam.
Idiots.
No, it's the older I get, the more appreciative I get of how good I've had it as an American. And Americans are always given a false choice. It's either great or it's horrible. And it's like, no, it's there's a long continuum between great and horrible. And
oh yeah,
most everything is great in this country, and there are a few things that aren't so great, but I would rather live. I've lived in multiple countries, and I would live in this country ahead of all the others by, light years.
Yeah.
Especially now.
Boy. We have a conspiranoid in the chat.
Uh-oh.
So distracting. The problem with these guys, this one, I'm not bouncing because at least he's not being a pest. But the problem is big pharma because they hide the solution because they want you sick. God, people are stupid.
If big pharma really wanted you sick, then it wouldn't make. Okay, I have glaucoma, and my glaucoma has been totally arrested. And I'll have to take the medication, but if big pharma were smart, they would make my medication, make my glaucoma get worse and worse and worse until I was taking medication that cost $1,200 a bottle. Or
but don't you know that they're selling you this medication, but they have the cure because the Cubans are curing glaucoma with shark cartilage.
Oh, with motor oil. All you have to do is go to a Cuban clinic, and they'll put a drop of used motor oil in your eyeballs, and your eye pressure, it drops down to zero because your eyeball falls out, and there's no pressure in a dead eyeball.
No. This is my last reference to our conspiranoid, because when you look at materials from the 1800s, you will see that it's the November 884 scientific periodical is one example. Right, because in 1800 they cured pancreatic cancer by, I don't know, invoking the spirits. You fucking moron.
Well, if you want to see some of the most horrifying imagery of your life, there are woodcuts that show prostatectomies done without anesthesia in the year 1800. And
nobody gets close to my prostate without anesthesia. I'm telling you now.
Well, I have a book called something like Stories from History, and a woman describes having a mastectomy with no anesthesia in the year 1812, and essentially 4 adults hold you down, and then the doctor cuts off your breast as fast as he can. They invented.
Lovely. By the way, the guy, one of the pioneers of the use of anesthesia, which was essentially ether chloroform based
Mhm.
in the early 1800s was Dr. Jacob Tewksbury of Maine, who traveled around the world introducing the use of anesthesia to doctors everywhere, and ended up being a California pioneer. He settled in San Francisco in 1848
Hmm.
and soon abandoned medicine and became a land speculator. With the growth in San Francisco at the time, it would have been silly of him not to, and made one of the largest fortunes in the country. Jacob Tewksbury. Before him, every single procedure, and they would do them, and there was a 90% mortality. Because other than fairly simple procedures like getting a bullet lodged in your gut, um, were a little bit more successful, provided it didn't touch internal organs. And most of the patients died in surgery, but we haven't advanced anything.
There was a British doctor who invented a leg amputating blade. It looks like a sickle, and he could amputate a leg. He would use this sickle and he would cut through all the flesh, and then
Yep.
he would take a bone saw and cut off the bone.
And
And he
yep,
could do
so
that he could do that in under 30 seconds.
no, they used to do that. They used to do that in the Civil War. They perfected the technique
Yeah,
of
yeah.
doing this. And even though anesthesia was already known, in most cases they just didn't have it available.
No, I mean there's photos of doctors' tents in the Civil War with these big piles of amputated limbs sitting next to the tent. No, Big Pharma saved my life. Big Pharma is saving my life now by keeping my blood pressure low. And
Yes.
if Big Pharma wanted to keep me sick, they wouldn't invent blood pressure medication that would lower my blood pressure to the point that I'm out of danger.
Right. Listen,
Yeah.
when I was born, life expectancy was 68.
Mhm.
In 2 years, I'm going to have gone past that mark. There were very few nonagenarians. Very few people made it past 80. Right now, you have 92-year-olds playing golf and popping Viagra's to fight the golf girl. Eh,
Well,
we have a longer and better life than any generation since Adam walked the earth. So,
think about it. Okay, you and I
by the
are in
way,
our
I just blocked the conspiranoid because I cannot be distracted with bullshit.
okay. You and I are in our 60s. 50 years ago, we would be like retired old men playing chess in the park.
Playing dominoes.
But yeah, but you and I have plans for the future. We have no plans on slowing down.
I know.
I'm self-employed, so I can't technically retire from my own employment. But you hear people say all the time, "Oh, I don't want to live to be old. I want to live to be at least 100 because I want to see what's coming. I want to see what changes. Like the changes that we're living through right now are tectonic in this country, in the Middle East, in Europe. I just saw a document.
Don't you want to travel the peaceful Middle East?
Travel, I don't know, but I do want to see. I want to see more of what I'm seeing coming out of Syria, where they're cheering the United States. You know, I want to see that. I want to see.
Well, if you're not going to travel, I'll send you pictures, man.
Yeah.
I'm really going to be there. You know what
sure.
I want to see? Do you know what I want to see?
America, great again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to see the country, and I don't mean whole. Well, no, I mean the country I know.
Yeah.
I mean the country I know. Another thing, talking about the country I know. Another thing about the big fat wolf of a bill. Remember Biden's Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah.
Remember that piece of shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
That piece of shit created all kinds of, and I didn't hear anybody. I didn't hear a single fucking Democrat complain about the amount of money being spent on bullshit on that one. And it created all of the subsidies and tax credits and all that jazz for clean energy, electric vehicles, uh, energy efficiency programs, insulation for their homes, all of that shit. You know what happened to all of that shit yesterday?
Adios. Fuera.
Adios, baby, fuera. We are going to save dozens of billions of dollars in subsidies for toy cars for the rich.
Well, okay. You and I were talking about Elon Musk. Musk has
Yep,
been subsidized in his electric car industry since the
since he
beginning.
started.
And there are lots of complaints about Teslas. It could be argued that Musk hasn't had to make his product as high quality as he would have had to without the subsidies. And maybe now he will start making his car better quality. Um, he will be forced to, and he will make the stock shares go up again and the values go up, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, because Teslas at best are problematic vehicles. And
I bet it's being very generous, yes.
yeah, all electric vehicles are problematic, with the exception of golf carts. But it's he had a nice long
And
run.
at least golf cars have a small battery and do not spontaneously combust.
Well, that's the thing. It's I understand if he's genuinely angry, and I guess he announced the formation of the what party?
The
The
American Party, which is
ah
the name by which the Know Nothings went by in 1850. It was an anti-immigration, anti-German, anti-Catholic, anti-Italian uh, party of fucking nativist morons. And that's the name this fucker is choosing now because he knows zero about our history, to put it mildly. Should have stayed away from that kind of shit. But okay, if he wants to restart what we all know as the nativist Know Nothing Party, it's up to him. This is a free country. If he wants to burn himself a lo bonzo in a public square because he lost his uh, 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 subsidies, be my guest. I'm not going to complain about that.
no, I mean I don't have any criticism of him. I don't care. He's allowed to be angry at Trump if it's real, and just whatever. I have no interest in the alleged Trump Musk feud. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. But subsidies do interest me, and we've all known for decades now that all these subsidies are giant ripoffs, and
Absolutely.
they were just accepted. It was seen as the cost of doing business, and Trump said, "The hell it is,"
The
and
hell with it.
so they're
And
gone.
electric vehicles is only a small part.
Yep.
And this also affects Elon, the crony capitalist. Solar panels. Not
Hmm.
only are we no longer paying for subsidies for solar panels. We're not paying for tax credits so that people can ruin their houses with that shit. We're not. Um, we're actually going to collect taxes on the sale of that shit.
Mhm.
So they're not tax free. They're not subsidized. They don't get you don't get any more tax credits. But now you have to pay the price, including the 55% tariff on Chinese shit, because 90% of these fuckers come from China, and you're gonna have to pay tax on it too. Good, good fucking riddance. Now let the most efficient energy systems survive, which is what we should have done from the very beginning. Will it be gas? Oil? Coal is back.
Mhm.
Copper smelters are back. I don't know if people realize how game changing all of this is. Nuclear energy is back. It's going to be 7 years before we have a no nuclear energy reactor, but they're coming back. Which will be the one of the future? I don't fucking know. Let their efficiency, productivity, and stability determine that. One thing I can tell you for sure, Obama did the same shit with ethanol.
Mhm.
He subsidized ethanol to a degree that we were living, uh, 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 we were using the most of our corn for fuel production. There were riots in Mexico because of the price hikes on tortillas. That's how bad it was. Uh, the price of sheetrock trebled in a year, and the price of construction went through the roof because, oh, it appears corn is not just corn on the cob.
Mhm.
Whatever happened to that ethanol canard? I used to rail that we spent more diesel per, we spent more diesel producing a gallon of ethanol than the energy the gallon of ethanol provided. It
Mhm.
was absurd on its face. And yet, it went for a number of years. We lost hundreds of billions of dollars pushing that shit. The same thing is going to happen to solar and all of this crap.
Well,
And the
remember
thing
there
that,
was some. Uh, to think
yeah,
that.
you remember?
Remember there was some bright, shiny, smiley city representative who was touting their new fleet of electric cars, and she was asked, where do they get their energy? And she said, well, you plug them into the wall. He said, but where does the energy come from the wall? She said, well, from the wall. He said, no, the energy comes from coal
Coal
plants.
plants in China.
Yeah. And she had no idea. She
No,
was.
we spent billions upon billions to reduce our carbon footprint while China's expanded a hundredfold, erasing all of our efforts and not spending any fucking time in it. It is the biggest scam in the history of the world. The biggest one
Well, let's
by
see.
far.
Um, Malaysia. Malaysia just stopped taking our recyclable plastic. We were sending our recyclable plastic to Malaysia where they buried it in the ground. Apparently, apparently nobody recycles plastic anywhere in the world. We've been
No,
shipping our plastic out to be buried in landfills. And you're supposed to feel this glow of virtue when you put your
oh,
plastic into
virtue.
the blue. Yeah.
When you see in most cities in America, the garbage truck pick up the contents of the general garbage, recycled glass, recycled plastic, recycled paper, and put them all in the fucking truck, mix them up, and take it to the dump.
Yeah.
But you have a lot of beamers out there smiling because they're virtuous, because they put each in its container.
Yeah.
It's foolish. And by the way, I don't worry about it. There is plenty of space for the city dumps.
Well, also they
And
produce what, methanol?
ethanol,
What's the
which is right here in Davie, not far from where I am, it, you have these dumps that are now look like parks
Mhm.
because they're immediately covered and there is green grass on top of it, and you have the little tubes here and there to allow for gas to leave before it explodes. And in this one case here, and another one I know in Palm Beach, they collect that gas, that ethanol,
Yeah.
into a little energy plant right next to the thing and produce energy out of the ethanol produced in the dump. And that's okay. I have no problem with that. I think that's intelligent use of the resource.
Mhm.
But you know, gas is back, oil
Well,
is back.
you were talking about the Chinese carbon footprints,
Yeah,
erasing whatever benefit we've created. 80% of the shit in those giant floating plastic reefs out in the ocean,
China.
80% of them are Chinese.
Yes,
80% of it are Chinese shopping bags. And
yes,
you see fishermen out there pulling Chinese shit out of the water. And
yeah.
so if the Chinese are busy wrecking the planet, why are we patting ourselves on the back for driving Teslas? It's ridiculous.
Which incidentally pollute at a much higher degree than a Ford 250.
Of course, they're massively
It,
heavy. They ruin the freeways. They create rubber tire dust like you wouldn't
rubber
believe.
dust.
Rubber dust. The batteries are never recycled. They're just sort of plopped in a hole. Um, it costs 80,000 to replace your battery in your Tesla.
uh,
I don't know.
It's insane. And by the way, and everything that goes into a Tesla, every piece of plastic, every, it's all contaminating at a higher degree than anything else. It,
Mhm.
don't get me started with the elements that compose the battery, because that is enough to make anyone cry. So fuck the sons of bitches. Welcome to sanity, and let efficiency win. We're going to live in a better world and we're going to spend a shit lot less than we are now for our electricity bills.
Yeah.
Um, Another bad measure of the big bad wolf of a bill, food stamps. Yay! You know there are nearly 40 million Americans receiving food stamps. This is fucking insane. It used to be a system to catch the poorest of the poor so that we can put some food on their table. Now we're
Hmm.
paying for Italian cold cuts for the wealthy.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
there is something that they already know, the error payment rate, which is states we know are giving food stamps. And I can see it here in Florida to assholes who pay with a food stamp card and then drive away on a fucking Bentley. That's a $240,000
Mhm.
car. Now, the government will continue to fund the benefits for states that have an error payment rate below 6%. Hold on. We are accepting that at least six for every 100 recipients are driving Bentleys?
Hmm.
Holy fuck. And that is an improvement because right now in some states is way above 15, 20%.
Oh, sure.
What's wrong with this? What's fucking wrong
Well,
with
here in
limiting
California,
the amount of Bentley drivers to 6% of total recipients?
well, there was a church down the street that during COVID, they they started having food giveaway. And I didn't know this was happening until all the streets started getting packed with Mercedes and all these other high-end vehicles. And these are all people who were going to the church to get free food. And it was amazing. You'd watch the Mercedes pull up to the table, and they'd hand them a big box of food. Yeah. And it's like, don't give someone in a Mercedes free food. That's a good rule of thumb. You know?
Yeah, well, I saw it helping my daughter with food drives when she was in the junior ROTC. And there were people in Mercedes Benzes, BMWs, stopping, and they stop, open the trunk, and one of the kids puts the box in there. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be fucking kidding me. I don't think people should walk there. But if you have $150,000 car, don't you? Are you so shameless?
Well, see, there's a certain type of person. There's a certain type of person whose goal is to get away with as much as they can, and they brag about it. You know, these idiots gave me free food. Ha ha ha. Here in California, they basically they advertise. Use your EBT cards here. We take EBT cards.
Yeah.
And allegedly there are, limits on what you can buy with it, but you see people buying ice cream with EBT cards.
Oh yeah. No, there are practically no limits now.
Yeah.
In most states. You can spend your money on I don't know, caviar.
Yeah.
Or God forbid, I mean Fiji water, a steak. Give me a break. So that's another one. I don't know. Oh, one of my favorites, the debt limit. The debt limit. The Senate actually raised it from 4 to 5 trillion more. Good. Good. That means President Trump, throughout the remainder of his term, will not have to go back to Congress to get a raise on the debt ceiling, and that's good. Even though assholes like Rand Paul or Massey wanted to take this out of this bill to deal with it separately in a clean bill. That is, they wanted to give Schumer and Jeffries a gun, but particularly Schumer. They wanted to give Schumer a gun so that Schumer could put it to the head of the president and demand concessions, or we're going to a government shutdown. And you know that, however stupid that is, it does have a political effect, a big one. Now, Schumer will not have that done for the remainder of the term, and that's a good thing. And every single Republican who wailed and cried because we didn't give the gun to Schumer is an asshole or the enemy. Take your pick. I'm sure there are both of them.
Well, you just have these implacable weirdos like Rand Paul, where what they're demanding is completely unfeasible, and it'll cause far more problems than it'll solve.
Yep.
But they won't be turned aside. They stick with it. They vote no, and they end up with a career of not having accomplished anything. I don't know. It's just really bizarre. And
they end up on TV infomercials selling gold.
Yeah. Having strokes on TV. We were talking about strokes. Do you ever see Rand Paul having a stroke on TV? That was it was shocking. He was talking, and all of a sudden he just started going appa yappa lappa 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 yappa lappa, and They let him go.
Most people didn't notice the difference.
Well, they let him go for almost a minute before they said, come on, move off stage. But, he recovered. But I don't know. Selling gold. That's another thing that really gets to me. Buy gold bars. Well, ship them to your house and keep them under your bed. Because when the world goes to hell, everyone's going to want gold. Yep.
For people out there who may be listening to us, my advice is do not invest in gold, as I would advise you against investing in any commodity because they are by nature volatile.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that you have enough money out there that you want to play a couple of chips to the zero, and buy. The last thing you want is physical gold. Because imagine this: you buy physical gold, they send it to you, you put it in a safe at home. So far, so good. Now you need to sell it. Damn, you're gonna start going to jewelers around town who are gonna tell you, I'm not buying today, because jewelers will never buy gold that they haven't already sold, that they don't already need for jewelry that has been ordered, for instance. And when you do find somebody buying gold, they're going to stiff you on the price.
You bet.
So you're going to try to sell it back to the same wonderful company that sold it to you. Hold on a second, because you've had the gold in your house and it hasn't been under anybody's control. So the first thing they need to do is test it to make sure that it is the purity and they're going to charge you so much for those tests that you better pray that gold went up dramatically or you're not making any money. They'll fuck you on the price, they'll fuck you on the testing, they'll fuck you on the delivery, because mailing gold is not so easy and you have to insure it and it's expensive. So if you want to invest in gold, you invest in gold in an account, in an investment account, in an IRA. Never fucking never get delivery of physical gold. It's the stupidest thing people can do.
There's a channel on YouTube, and what this guy does, he lives in New York City. He goes around the city with a metal detector, and he also goes to pawn shops and old jewelry shops, and he gets gold-plated necklaces and things like that.
Yeah.
And then he uses this horrifying chemical and heat to boil down the gold-plated stuff and separate the gold from everything else. And then he ends up with a little bar about this size. He's got one man in the world who will buy that gold bar for him for what it's worth. And so he only goes through the trouble of making this gold bar on occasion. If he wants something he wants to buy a yacht or something, he'll make this gold bar, and he always sells it to one man, and we don't know what that guy is doing with it, but he's the only person in the world who will give this guy, he tells us over and over, this is the only man in the world, and he only does business with me, and he will give me what this gold bar is worth. If you take it to a gold seller, they'll give you maybe 10% of what it's worth.
Yes. And so, I have a friend. Actually, I think I introduced him to you once. He's the one who kept me alive when I was in the hole. He would smuggle food for me every now and then. Turns out he spent the rest of his life as a jeweler.
Mm-hmm.
And now he still does work as a jeweler, and he's an artist with the laser and all that jazz. But whenever he is in need of money, he goes out and buys old jewelry, pretty much what you just described, and goes to people's houses with his little weight and buys the thing. And then he smelts it, he separates the gold, And again, he has one guy that he sells the gold to, and he needs a new car. He'll go and do it. And this is not a YouTube video. This is a guy I know too fucking well, and and it works for him. But
Mhm.
that's not the position of the average gold investor who is a schmuck, who's going to be fucked on the price buying, he's going to be fucked on the price selling, and he's going to be fucked on the testing and the shipping
Mhm.
when he wants to get rid of the thing. So don't listen to the Ron Pauls of this world, people. And no, gold is not a good investment for the bad times. It's a good investment for the good times.
I watch a lot of Korean crime dramas, and there's always a scene where the villain has a safe and he opens up the safe and he's got stacks and stacks of bills and he always has gold bars. And then there's always a scene where he has to flee in a hurry. So he gets his soccer player bag and he sweeps all the cash into the bag. Then he leaves the gold bars because they're too frigging heavy to like
To him,
carry with him.
somebody here says, I know a couple who bought gold and silver. It ended up ruining them. Yes, most of them end like that. Most of them end like that. Just take a look at the people buying gold and silver in the little stores that look pretty much like a Mexican transfer store.
Mhm.
Do you think they're making a lot of money? Think about that. If those people who make a living out of buying and selling gold cannot make enough money to buy a decent car or live in a decent house, you're not going to either because the profit goes to them and they're not
Well,
making enough.
I once had a piece of jewelry made for a woman, and she broke up with me right before I was going to give it to her. It was a custom made necklace. So I took it to a different jeweler, and they offered me like $13. And it cost me like $200 to have it made. And they were just talking about the amount of gold in it. And if I'd accepted the $13, they would have sold it for $200. Like they weren't in the business of giving deals; they were in the business of making as much profit as they could. And like you said, the professional gold seller, or you always hear about them. He's a professional stamp seller, or whatever.
Yeah,
And
numismatics.
yeah,
By the way, you keep talking, I'll be right
yeah,
back.
yeah. No, and he looks like a bum. He has to carry around all his wealth with him. He eventually meets a sexy 19-year-old who turns out to be a murderer because she's got a boyfriend on the side, and they murder this poor old schmuck. And they take his stamps or whatever it is he's hauling around, and then they can't sell it. He's got $100,000 worth of stuff, but the issue is you can't sell it unless you. This is what I've learned. I used to like my postcard collection and a couple other things I collect. You have to sell them directly to another collector. You cannot sell it to a dealer because the dealer will give you 10% on the dollar, and then he's the one who sells it to the collectors. So you have to take the trouble to find collectors, and it's really hard to find a collector because then, okay, you've got this something that the collector wants. The collector's terrified that if he shows up somewhere with money, you're just going to shoot him and take his money. So you have to figure out a way to convince the person that you have the actual thing he wants. Then you have to figure out a way to meet. Usually you have to hire a lawyer, and you give whatever it is to the lawyer, and he keeps it in his office. And the other guy's lawyer shows up, and they make the exchange, and then you get whatever it is, and you have to pay the lawyer a fee, usually his hourly rate, which might be as much as $600 an hour.
Yeah.
So
And it goes both ways because you don't want to show up with this stuff because then you get knocked off.
well, that's the thing. It's very difficult to make The people who are selling the gold on through advertisements, they're the ones making the money on all this. Nobody else is making the money, and it's really eerie.
So just remember, folks, the next time you see Ron Paul peddling this shit, know that he's a grifter.
Yeah, I mean,
a first-class grifter.
Most collectors are insane.
His is not much better.
Most collectors of any item are insane, and to have to deal with them directly, that's another problem because they're insane. They're weirdos. They're eccentric at best, and they're insane at worst. And they make you promises that always fall through, and then they make excuses, and they've proven to you that they have it, but for some reason, it's impossible to get them. You make it an appointment to meet with them. They don't show up, and then they give you some pathetic excuse. You make another appointment. They don't show up for that because they're crazy. They're crazy, and they don't know what they want. They don't know if they want to get rid of it or keep it, and then they'll blame you. I mean, it's a nightmare.
No.
So
it's ridiculous. So enough of those grifters. By the way, Angel says, don't forget the glass roofs on Teslas. Who thought that was a good idea?
Yeah.
But that's another thing. The Tesla truck is the ugliest fucking thing on wheels since the Aztec. Remember the Aztec, the futuristic looking SUV from Chevrolet?
Oh, yeah.
In the 90s?
Yep.
The Aztec was, back then, the ugliest piece of shit on wheels, and it failed miserably. I've never seen such an ugly car until the Tesla truck. Who the fuck thinks it looks cool?
I don't know.
It's ugly.
It looks especially ugly from behind.
Oh, God.
I saw a photo that a guy took on a freeway of a Tesla truck passing him, and he said, I just got passed by a refrigerator. And it's true. It looked like a refrigerator.
Yeah. A black refrigerator. Yeah. And he has that slanted back.
Yeah.
But the other way around, because it robs you of a shit ton of cargo capacity, which they have to do, because if you put on this damn piece of shit the amount of cargo that you can put on a Ford 350, it won't move.
Yeah. Yeah.
It will not fucking move.
Yeah.
And God forbid you want to use it for anything in the winter time in the north, because if you drive 40 miles, you've gone too far. You have to find motels every 40 miles so you can sleep while it charges. These people are insanely stupid.
Yeah, I mean, California is, luckily the no more internal combustion engines by 2035 is dead in the water. But if all of this had gone through, the state would have ended up with electricity rationing like Cuba. And this is so easy to see. For one thing, there are no charging stations. It's estimated that California needs 250,000 charging stations. And since they went on this, they raised the funds to build those 250,000, and they built seven charging stations.
They're Democrats, baby.
So there's no charging stations.
10% for building the stations, 90% for them.
For them. So there's no charging stations. If we did have 250,000 charging stations, the grid would go down. If the grid goes down, then we have electricity rationing, because the Sierra Club isn't going to let them fortify the grid in any way. So,
without USA ID and other perks, the Sierra Club is not going to be getting half the money.
True.
That's another benefit of this law. There's another one. In 2017, the Trump tax plan uh, increased the deductibles,
Hmm.
or increased the amount of money you can automatically deduct from your income, and then you pay taxes on the balance. Which means that a couple making 24,000 a year will pay fucking zero using the standard deduction. Which means that that waiter that now has no tax on tips would have never paid any tax on any tips. Number one, because cash tips are never reported,
Never.
never ever reported. If they ever find one guy who declares tax tips, or rather cash tips, it should be investigated because he's up to no good. The only tips that ever get reported are those paid through credit cards.
Hmm.
And not all of the time, big restaurants will uh, um, report the tips um, paid to individual waiters, uh, but sometimes that is even difficult to do, particularly in restaurants where they pull the tips.
Hmm.
How much did anybody get? Nobody fucking knows. Nobody reports it. The IRS doesn't know. They never go after that. It's peanuts. But still, a waitress that makes a couple of $100 in tips every time she works and collects a whooping $2.75 an hour in salary, by the time she applies the standard deduction, you know how much in taxes she'll be paying?
None.
Zero anyway. This is like a tax cut for the people who don't pay taxes. It's ridiculous. They're going to be below zero now. Who cares? And one reason that would be the case is January 1st, all of the Trump tax cuts were due to expire. And the standard deduction would have been cut in half.
Hmm.
Now, for that waitress, it would make not much of a difference. But for a middle class family that is taking the $24,000 standard deduction, it would have, because now they have to go to 12. And that means they're going to have 20% of $12,000 to pay where they had none.
Hmm.
Eh, It's beautiful. It works. There are a couple of things that are pure demagoguery. No tax on car loan interest. For those who take the standard deduction, it makes no fucking difference one way or another. For those who do an itemized uh, 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 return, it may save them a couple of $100 in taxes. Maybe. Just fucking maybe. It will also expose them to an audit because itemized deductions are more uh, likely to be audited than standard deductions because there are no receipts to show with the standard deduction. Duh. So, however, keeping the current standard deduction is a bonanza for low income families that keeps them completely outside of having to pay any taxes at all. But you know who's going to have to pay taxes? Sports club owners,
Hmm.
because their subsidies and their credits and their loopholes are closed now. So this big beautiful bill gives a huge benefit to everybody making under 50 grand a year and shafts Cuban. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I
I'm all
mean,
for it. You don't hear the Democrats say that though.
no. Or even the what do they call them? The deficit hawks on our side.
Oh, they're all grifters. None of them give a flying fuck about the deficit, the debt, or anything else. They're grifters, demagogues, and in most cases, completely ignorant of what they tackle. They know
Or they're,
nothing about the debt, less about the deficit.
or they're just into it, you know, what's the guy's name? The former Navy SEAL, Dan something or other.
Bongino? No,
Dan,
Bongino was
no. Uh,
O'Neill,
no,
Robert O'Neill,
no. His name
the
is
guy who took
Dan.
in later.
U.S. Senator Dan or U.S. Congressman Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry, but the only thing that comes to my mind is Lieutenant Dan. I can see him in the Swinburne. Crenshaw. Oh,
Crenshaw.
the
Yeah, yeah,
one-eyed wonder. Yes.
yeah. Crenshaw. So, yeah, like that guy. That guy's in it strictly for Dan Crenshaw, and you
Oh
know,
yeah.
um, well, all of them. I mean, like, isn't it time we try and figure out how Sandy Cortez is um, how come she's a millionaire now?
I've been saying it for years now.
Yeah,
How come she was a multi-billionaire 2 years after not being able to afford rent?
yep,
Big question, isn't it?
sure.
Somebody says I'm torn over the salt deductions. If it was up to me, there would be no salt deductions. If you don't like the taxes you're paying in New York or California, move to Texas, asshole, or to New Hampshire or to Florida. But if you choose to live there because for some reason it benefits you, then pay. And if you have a problem with the tax policy of your state, vote the bums out. But this notion that the farmers from Iowa and lifeguards from Florida have to pay extra taxes to make whole the millionaires of Los Angeles and New York. No, fuck that.
Hmm.
I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I don't think there should be any connection between federal and state. Now, in the original thing, that we're going to make a permanent increase in the amount that people could deduct of state taxes in the federal return. In the final bill, that thing sunsets in 2 years. It's obviously a compromise, but it's a compromise that I can live with because it sunsets in 2 years, assholes. Um,
Hmm.
good luck getting it reinstated. So we're not getting the savings now, but we will in a couple of years.
Sure.
Um, Emery says the eye patch guy. Yeah, that one.
Yep.
He might as well walk around Congress with a fucking parrot on his shoulder. He's a political pirate. Um, I so I I mistrusted the Freedom Caucus from day one, but now I'm more than disgusted. They really sicken me. They're opportunistic little fucks at best. Um, he is a dick, says Deb. Yeah, he's a dick with a small one. Um, what else did I have? Did I miss anything? I'm sure I missed something from the big fat wolf.
Well, there's so much. It's hard to hard.
It's hard to get it all. To get it all. The tax credit for children. It's 2,000 now. It goes back to 1,000. It was scheduled to go back to 1,000 next year. Um, Now they increase it permanently to 2,200. Um, I still don't like it. What I don't like is a tax credit format because this is not a deduction in taxes so that people with more children pay less taxes. No, this is people who don't pay any tax at all get money from the government that the government took from somebody else just for having a kid. There are other institutions that can take care of that. I don't believe in income redistribution. I don't think that people should say punish couples that are willing to have a kid until they can buy a home or get a decent job. and force them to pay taxes so that the government can give money to some asshole in a trailer park to 12 little morons running around it. I don't like it. Never did. It stays. Well, can't win them all. I thought I was going to get a reaction with you with the trailer park reference.
Well, I just did you know that Tucker Carlson is going to interview the president of Iran?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I did tell you when we spoke today. Prevazian, by the end of the show, you're going to know exactly how many people live in Iran. You're not going to know how many are in a gulag. Why? I remember many, many years ago when Prevazian's predecessor, Ahmadinejad, was received to give a speech at Columbia University. He was giving the red carpet treatment, and they defended it. Of course, Iran was an enemy of the US. This is like having Hitler give a speech at NYU in 1942. This is ridiculous. But they did anyway. This is no different. It's giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Is giving space, camera, viewers to an enemy of the US and mankind who's going to come over here to spill his third-rate propaganda to the slobbering consent of Tucker Carlson. It's shameful.
Well, Tucker's going to ask him, tell us the truth about your nuclear energy program. And he's going to say, it was for peaceful purposes. And Tucker will say, see, look, you heard it from the horse's mouth. That's what's going to happen.
Among other things, yes.
But the good,
and of course, you didn't break anything. We still have our working centrifuges, and you didn't do any damage.
Well, the good thing is that none of this shit is going to stop the Israelis. The Israelis are still fighting in Iran on the ground. There are stories that they're still flying combat air patrols over Iran.
They killed a general in Tehran 2 days ago.
Yeah. So,
fuck the asshole.
If I were Tucker, I would be very careful. What if a bomb goes off course?
You see, the problem when you sit down with a target, is that the expensive way may not realize you're not it.
Yeah.
But what an asshole! What an opportunistic, grifting asshole!
And again, you just have to ask yourself, Tucker, what would the world be like if the Iranians were the hyperpower? And this is something that he would dodge. He would not discuss this. He would not have an hour-long discussion about that concept. He would refuse.
Iranian militias in Iraq, the People Mobilization Units and all that jazz, have been attacking American targets in Erbil all of this past week.
Mm-hmm.
These are direct attacks of Iran to America.
Mm-hmm.
It's only a matter of time before we have to lament a dead soldier or diplomat. Why is this asshole talking to the head of a government that is shooting at Americans?
Well, see, Tucker's narrative, is that the United States joined Israel's war with Iran. And it's like, Tucker, they say death to America 100 times more often than they say death to Israel.
We're the great son, not the little one.
Exactly. So we're already at war with Iran, a war that the Iranians started. So we didn't join.
Did Israel have anything to do with the attack on the American embassy in Tehran?
Absolutely not.
Were we in Beirut protecting Israeli interests or trying to save the Muslim slash Christian Lebanese government from the onslaught of Palestinian nuttiness?
Exactly. But see,
Since when this is Israel's war? We have been at war with Iran since 1979. If anything, Israel has joined our war with Iran.
well, and also we've been in utter and total control of Israel since its creation. Um, the notion that the Israelis give our presidents their marching orders is absolutely absurd. As as magnificent as the Israelis' armed forces are, if we went to war with Israel, it would be over in a matter of weeks, probably a week, given our strategic air power. Israel is a tiny, tiny country. It's got what? A population of how many million?
About 9.
Yeah, 9 million. It
That's,
wouldn't.
that's half Greater New York.
The Israelis are not giving us their marching order, it's not happening. It's never happened.
In a country that's always 20 miles wide.
We have always interfered and ordered the Israelis to not do what they had to do. And this time around, it was a confluence of Hamas making a stupid mistake and the Israelis eventually getting a president who was willing to let them do what they had to do. Okay, the Israelis have already announced that the ceasefire deal that Hamas wants is unacceptable. So that's the end of that. They're going to Qatar anyway, but we're not going to force the Israelis to sign a ceasefire that they find unacceptable. It's not going to happen. So, and the Israelis they're turning their attacks on Hamas up to 25 on a scale of 10. So, this is going to be over soon.
Hamas is only in control of about 25% of Gaza now. The rest is clear.
Yeah.
The Israelis are cornering anybody who is not a combatant in a staging area where they are being taken out of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a combatant, come over here. They check you, they make sure you have nothing to do, and they let you leave. And they are leaving to a number of countries. What's left of Hamas are what in the numbers game of Naples is called a 48.
Mm-hmm.
Dead man talking. They don't know they're dead, but they're dead. They're on borrowed time. If Israel doesn't kill them, the tribes will, the
Mm-hmm.
clans. Eh, Gaza was essentially it was governed by 7 clans: Rafah, Gaza City, Khan Yunis. Each one had its own clan. All of those were dominated and controlled by Hamas. They never quite fucking liked it, and they're now itching for revenge. And for the first time in 15 years, they have a chance to even the score,
Mm-hmm.
and they will. And there is a possibility that Mordechai Kedar told me 2 years ago eh, that the government in Gaza will be a limited number of small emirates with
Mm-hmm.
jurisdiction over a city and no more, with all the interstices filled with control by the IDF.
Mm-hmm.
They will control their city and the region, and the spaces in between them is going to be the IDF, and that might actually work. It might actually work. But in any case, The tribes don't want to go back to the status quo any more than the Israelis do. Hamas is there. The rest is just doing the accounting. No more land for peace, says Kelly. It doesn't work. No, it doesn't work at fucking all. It never worked, and it's been proven.
Well,
Yep.
I was going to say the only way you can deal with terrorists is to kill them. But look at Syria. Syria
Yeah,
appears
or they can surrender too.
They can surrender, yes. Syria appears to be, the guy running Syria appears to be the real thing. And, you know, Trump is careful. We lifted all the sanctions on Syria.
Yep.
And Trump met him and shook his hand. And in Israel, this guy is appearing on posters with all the other Middle Eastern leaders who want to make peace with Israel.
Yep.
So if it can happen in Syria, it certainly can happen in Gaza and in Iran. But Gaza is going to be the hardest because the population was entirely a population of combatants. And that includes children down to the age of 5 years old. And that's why, okay, there's absolutely no way that 50,000 people are dead. No way in hell. But even if that were the case, 99% of those people were combatants, including women and including 5-year-old children.
Out of a population of 2 million, which
exactly. It's not you hear people, it's a genocide. Really? Are they trying to exterminate the Palestinians? They're doing a really bad job if that's
by the way, if that was the purpose, they could have done it in 3 weeks.
Well, exactly.
They didn't have to send troops to dangerous operations in tunnels. They could have raised that fucking place in 3 weeks.
Well, they could have raised it and they could have cleaned out all the survivors with flamethrowers. You know, yep. They could have dropped napalm on them. It's Gaza is this big.
Yep.
It would be the easiest place in the world to commit total genocide. So when I hear people accuse the Israelis of committing genocide, all I can think of is that you are a dummy. Like you're vicious and you're obviously a Jew hater, but you're also a dummy.
Yeah,
like you don't even know what that word means. I don't know. I saw. Remember, I told you there was a stand-up comedian who I liked for a little bit less than an hour, and then I heard her spouting off against Israel. Well, she's appearing on a talk show run by a famous Jewish actress, comedian. And it's like, don't you know that this woman hates Jews? Why are you having her on your show? Because
some Jews hate themselves.
I don't know. I'm so the one thing that I cannot deal with at this point in my life is Jew hate, because the Jews aren't the problem. If the world were run by the Jews, it would be a much better place. But it's not. It's not run by the Jews at all.
Put it this way, maybe not. Who cares? It's not even a question. Unless you're a fucking moron, a late day convert to the protocols of the elders of Zion, who really thinks in this conspiracy of the Jews controlling the world. In which case, that doesn't make the Jews control the world, but it makes you an idiot.
It makes you an idiot. And you also don't know anything about the Jewish people. It's a bloody miracle that Israel still exists, given the fact that the one people who can't get along with Jews are Jews.
The common joke among Jews is whenever you have 3 Jews, you're going to have 4 opinions.
Yeah.
And it's true. They don't agree with themselves.
Yeah.
Not with themselves as a people, with themselves as a person.
No, I saw some Jewish stand-up comedian years ago. He was talking about Jewish people, and he said you take three Jewish guys and sit them at a table, and you give them each a glass of water. Two of them are going to get into a fight, and the third guy's going to have a heart attack. And it was yes, you're exactly right. That's what's going to happen.
No, no, no. It and you know, I read the protocols of the elders of Zion. I must have been about 16. And as a 16-year-old, I said, what the fuck is this shit? Studying this thing later, I went through all the history of the thing that was written by an intelligence couple of Tsar Nikolai. Uh, but what the historians don't tell you is that the intelligence officer of Tsar Nikolai, who wrote the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, actually plagiarized a bad novel written in Paris in 1848 by a fucking French communist asshole. And it's yet another gift of France to the world. It is originally conceived as a novel, a anti-Jewish novel, that for about 40 years sold as such until somebody decided to turn it into an intelligence report. Probably a predecessor of John Brennan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have the same kind of assholes with more imagination than decency creating intelligence reports out of thin fucking air amongst us. So it helped me realize that this is not only entirely possible, but it happens even here, even now. And it certainly did during the Obama years. So, how can anybody take this seriously? How can we today have any of these morons talking about a Judeo Masonic conspiracy, which is a canard created by fucking fascists in Europe who wanted to capitalize on the hatred of Jews and turn it onto the Masons as well? How can an American, uh, somebody in the land of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and Paul Revere, have any suspicion of Masons, asshole?
Well, I just think, I guess the greatest revenge is to make your enemies impotent. And all of Israel's enemies are impotent. One of them was smart enough to say, you know what? We don't even want to fight you. We're not your enemies anymore. We want to be friends. Let's shake hands and turn the Golan Heights into the Garden of Peace. What do you say? So that's Syria.
Listen. All of the proposals that have percolated in Syria are absolutely great.
Hmm?
Are absolutely great, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Saudis are advising Julani,
Yes.
because I hear echoes of MBS
Oh, yeah,
what he
absolutely.
says. Okay? And the- you know who's the biggest fucking loser other than the Democrats? The Iranians.
Hmm.
They just lost the most reliable ally and the route to the Mediterranean in one fell swoop.
Hmm.
And the second biggest loser, Russia.
Hmm.
I can almost guarantee you that Russian ships and planes are not ever returning to Tartus or Latakia.
No.
It's done. It's done. Speaking of Russia, they're not doing well lately, are they?
No. They just lost some of their highest commanders who all got together in the same room and got blown up. And okay, they're launching the largest raids on civilian areas, but they're losing everything militarily. They're losing their factories. They're losing their various plants. They're losing their war machine. And for the first time in his entire 20 odd years, Putin has told the Russian people that they need to brace for a terrible upcoming economy. So
we've been discussing this for a year. They're fucking broke.
yeah,
Their banks are insolvent. Their
yeah,
industry is destroyed. Their transportation is gone.
yep.
And they are so royally, thoroughly, irrevocably fucked. It's
Mhm.
going to take them 30 years of growth to go back to where they were 5 years ago. That's how fucked they are.
Mhm.
Their electricity production is affected. It's already left entire cities freezing in winter with no electricity, with no
Mhm.
heating.
Mhm.
Next winter is going to be worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Now they're getting troops from Laos.
Mhm.
You're going to be fucking kidding me.
Well, it was announced that they're now going to have Laotian sappers coming in to demine, and the claim is that the North Koreans have pledged 30,000 troops. That's 30,000 troops from 1952. I
Yes,
mean,
and parasitosis.
with what?
And parasitosis. In 1952, they were healthier.
Exactly. So this isn't going to help them. The Russians have said that the North Koreans caused more damage to Russia than they did to the Ukrainians. And now there's going to be 30,000 of them.
Yeah,
Apparently, they refuse to take orders from the Russians. And since they don't know how to fight, they just wander the battlefield until they're killed.
wonderful. I'm all for it. I like the
Yep.
idea. I like the idea. It is Mother Nature purging the world of genetic dead ends.
Yeah.
Eh, Now, why are they doing this? Because I mean, he's sending the elderly home patrol.
Mm-hmm.
They're really recruiting 60 to 70-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
and that tells you how fucking bad things are going for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they don't have weapons.
Yeah. Apparently, the average age of the Russian soldier at the front is 49 years old. That's
Yes.
the median. That's the average.
Oh, and it's going up, baby.
Unbelievable.
The new ones is like really like the elderly home patrol.
Yeah.
It's insane, and so they get younger blood from the Koreans who are willing to settle their soldiers cheap. I'll give you 10,000 assholes for one plane. That's the rate of exchange right now.
Also, the North Koreans are fighting as okay. The worst army in World War II, the worst of the major powers, was the Japanese because they had absolutely no sense of self-preservation.
Hmm.
So by 1943, they'd lost all their aircraft carriers,
Their
um,
pilots.
their pilots, and they were losing all their best soldiers. So by the end, it was women with spears. And the North Korea and in the Japanese, they were all there to die for the emperor. And it's the same thing with the North Koreans. They're finding these diaries that these dead fuckers are leaving
They're
behind.
dying for their leader.
They're dying for Kim Jong-un. Their goal is to die for him. It's
I'm-
not to win.
I
It's to die for Kim Jong-un.
I support and encourage their efforts.
Every soldier is given a hand grenade, and if he's wounded, he's supposed to wait till the Ukrainians come to try and help him, and then he blows himself up. So the
Yeah.
Ukrainians no longer try to help the North Koreans. They just bypass them until they
Yeah.
blow themselves up.
Until
Unbelievable.
they lose their grip.
Yeah.
Fuck him. I'm literally, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, uh, Armenia and Azerbaijan that have been at each other's throats since '89
Yep.
now are kissy joining a kind of effort with Turkey
Yep. Yep. Yep.
for a regional unity and telling Russia to go fuck itself.
And I think that's
You know,
fine. I think the Turks, I think it's fine if the Turks have a region of influence because
why not? It's
they're going to,
natural.
exactly, they're going to have influence over Azerbaijan,
Yeah,
Armenia, and northern
especially
Syria.
a NATO country is going to have influence over Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Oh, you bet. You
A
bet.
NATO country,
Yeah.
which people tend to forget. But Armenia used to be a satellite of Moscow.
The Armenians have already carried out their first exercises with NATO, and
Yeah,
they're saying they want to join NATO. So
yes. And then down the road they will. I
they
have
will.
no, like down the road Ukraine is going to, and I have no doubts either.
Yeah.
And not because NATO wants to expand east, it's because these people cannot run west faster. Their best recruiting tool for NATO ever is Putin.
You know, I watched a video today. There's a young Russian woman. She was blonde and blue eyed, but she was from way the hell up in Siberia, like even north of Siberia. And she left Russia and now she's living in Georgia. And when she was in Russia, she was the victim of a stalker. And she said that the police all said, "What did you do to encourage this guy? What are you doing to get him to keep coming back?"
I
And
sent them notes, asshole.
she said that the Georgian police are much more understanding. They're more European, and
Yeah, of course they are.
she's finding herself more and more drawn to the West. She left Russia because of the poverty issue. She speaks perfect English, and she's finding herself drawn more and more to the West because the West is more humane than Russia.
A little something for the fuckers out there who think that it's NATO expanding west. Armenia, Georgia, Romania are countries where the national drink is Moldova
Mhm.
is wine.
Mhm.
Wine, not vodka, wine. And they obtained their wine from grapes that were planted by the fucking Romans 3,000 years ago. They were part of the Roman Empire at one time. They are westernized in ways that people don't realize. Culturally, ethnically, their food, their moral qualities, and it's only logical that the Dacians want to stay with their cousins who like the same food, the same wine, and have the same principles. It is the Russians that are the hordes of savages and have never quite made it to civilization.
Well, it's really sad because the Russians expect to live in a pile of shit, and so because they do, it's just what they expect. They're fatalists, just like so many Latin Americans. Yeah. And somebody like this young Russian woman I was watching, she's an outlier. She wanted improvement. First, she taught herself to speak perfectly fluent English. Then she got out of Russia and she got a job in Georgia. She's visited most of Europe, and the video was about parasocial relationships and how, you being on YouTube, she has to set boundaries. There's certain things that she can't allow. And in Russia, it was like people showing up at her house drunk,
demanding favors.
Exactly. And the cop saying, well, he's just in love with you. Deal with it. Be nice to him.
Right.
Aren't you flattered?
Yeah. I mean, what do you get? You're flaunting your teeth about town. Of course,
Exactly.
somebody's gonna like him and want some of it.
Yeah. No, and okay, when your national drink is something like vodka, which is about the hardest of all hard liquors, with the exception of, I guess there's a few other.
No, there are other, but they're not drunk the same way. In Spain, you have a few moonshines in Galicia and the Basque Country that are considerably stronger than vodka.
Mhm.
But you don't drink a bottle of it. You drink about, a tiny little cup after a meal.
Mhm.
They say to help digestion. I say it probably does because it'll certainly dissolve anything in your digestive tract. But the thing is, you drink a tiny bit after a meal, that's it. The Russians will take that bottle and shove it intravenously.
Yep.
It's a cultural thing. It's not just that it is the most alcoholic drink. It probably is. It certainly is not. It, but the problem is the abuse of it, the culture that you have to be drunk.
Mhm.
It's the Russian ethos. Eh, Drinking and crying and crying and drinking. This is like a Dostoevsky fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want to understand the Russians? Read Brothers Karamazov.
Yep.
It's the most perfect self-portrait I've ever seen. I only understood that when I visited there. This is not a novel. This is a picture. It's a photography of a very, very, very fucking sick society.
Well,
And they were that. Yeah.
you figure they had their revolution in 1917,
Yes.
but that was because, okay, the Tsar was an idiot. He had like a 90 IQ, maybe 85. He was married to this German hysteric. She was constantly having breakdowns. She brings Rasputin, the guy who took 2 baths in his entire life and had a 12-inch penis. She brings him to the palace, and he cures, stops
Cured hysteria.
well, he stops the bleeding of the crown prince. And then, as much as they possibly can, they show off their wealth to the country that is the Russian steamroller is troops being sent in and being mowed down and sent in and mowed down and sent in and mowed down. And then finally they said, you know what, we're not going to die for these people anymore. That's just about the only time they stood up and said no.
Not quite. Because the Russian Revolution was practically bloodless, except
True.
for the taking of the Winter Palace.
True.
Number one, by the time of the Communist Revolution, the Tsar wasn't governing shit.
Yeah, it was
There was a revolution in 1905, and they created a parliamentary republic, and it was Kerensky who was
Kerensky. Yep.
the thing. So the revolution wasn't against the Tsar either. That's part of the bullshit that communists tells. It was against the fledgling social democracy created by Kerensky
Yep.
on the time of the revolution of 1905. And the Bolsheviks, who were a part of this, had a very big discussion about where to go. They lost, and they said, well, fuck it, we're going to take it anyway. And they were bold, and they took power. There wasn't a revolution. It was the political action in the army. The army was and the Navy in particular were spent after your very well descriptive analysis of the role in World War One. They were royal. In fact, they were walking out of the trenches and making it home, and there was no power on earth that could tell them. And they were coming home to misery, to lack of food, to lack of work because the economy was destroyed. And eventually, it was the Navy. Remember the Potemkin cruiser?
Yep, the sailors with the shirts that had the blue and white stripes across the front.
Yes.
That's like yep.
Yeah, and it was the sailors that essentially said, "Fuck it, we're not doing this anymore."
Yep.
And the army joined, and the Bolsheviks managed to elbow their way up front. And there weren't big battles or anything of the sort.
No, no.
And when the taking of the Winter Palace, it didn't take that long, and a number of people died. And when they accused Lenin of the violence and the death, he says that's their fault. They could never possibly win. They were in a losing situation, and they forced us to take it by force, which is a rather interesting concept because it's right. If you're in an untenable position, your resistance will cause unnecessary death. And that was his point.
Yeah. And the Russians put up with, I mean, the once the Bolsheviks took over, what the fuck's his name? Who got the pickaxe in his head in Mexico?
Trotsky, Leon Trotsky.
Yeah, Trotsky was basically in charge of these armored trains full of terrorist police officers wearing red leather, and they just went around from place to place butchering people. And the Russians put up with all this shit, and
because it was life as usual.
It was life as usual, exactly. And
because that's what they've been doing for 500 years.
Yes. And the Russians have always had the numbers to take over, to topple whatever government they wanted, and they just don't have it in them. They, like you said, the Kerensky government was absolutely ridiculous. I study World War I flamethrowers. The Russians had a flamethrower, and in order to test it and then approve it, it had to go through like 9 committees and commissions, and you know, everybody had to be paid off.
Which is what the libertarians want to do to the U.S.
Of course.
Government by deliberation.
Yeah.
We all have to get together and agree. Not in this fucking lifetime.
No,
the notion that government is a constant deliberative process. It's insane. It's bullshit, and it's what killed all of them. Once we elect our representatives, we let them do their job.
Yeah.
This thing that every fucking hour of every fucking day we have to be backseat driving, and this is part of the problem with the 24/7 news cycle. They have to put something on screen. But no, this is Clinton was a master at doing this. He was governing by national poll.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever Americans want to do, I support. It's a guarantee of popularity. It's also a guarantee that you're never going to do the right thing, except by chance.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with Kerensky and all the jazz is that they set up a government with an endless deliberative process, which meant that events always rolled over them.
Yeah, in the Kerensky army, the troops got a vote on whether or not they would carry out their orders.
Bingo. And of course, 9 out of 10 times, I know.
Yeah. No,
go to the front. There are bullets there, asshole, coming at me. I'm not going, you go.
No, the Allies very foolishly assigned Russia a summer offensive in the summer of 1917, and it was a flop. It was the biggest flop.
The Russians turned around and left.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
Yeah. You know, the invincible Russian army.
Oh, they were going up against the most combat-hardened troops on the in the world at that point, the Germans on the Eastern Front. And the Germans knocked the absolute piss out of them. And so they said, okay, that's it. We're done. And the Russians sued, or Kerensky fell, and then the Bolsheviks immediately sued for peace.
It was those same Germans who took Lenin out of Switzerland and spirited him back to Russia through Germany. In
an armored train with all the windows closed.
With all the windows closed, so nobody knew he was there. But it was the Germans who brought the Bolsheviks to life as a means of splitting the Allies, and they thought they were going to win the war with this. Alas, they underestimated everybody else. But have you noticed that nobody who counted on the Russians to win anything ever won anything?
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's true.
I mean, how did the Russians do in the Crimean War?
Oh, they lost the Crimean War because they're Russians.
I mean, literally.
Okay, have you ever seen the famous Russian photo of the soldier waving the red flag off Berlin?
Of course, at the Reichstag.
Okay, the photo was taken the day after the battle, so the photo was fake, and the guy holding him up had 3 watches on his wrists because he'd stolen them from the dead.
So he'd been looting the field, yes.
So they had to airbrush out 2 of the watches on his wrist.
I mean, come on. And the only reason they were there is, I don't know, probably at this point, Patton and company didn't give a shit. And okay, there's gonna be a house-to-house fighting in Berlin.
Exactly.
Let the fucking Russians eat the bullets, and we'll show up later.
The British and the Americans knew that the battle for Berlin was going to be horrible, and they didn't give a shit about glory.
No.
They wanted to save the lives of their men, and Stalin said, I don't give a shit about men, I just want the glory. So they said, have at it.
And I tell you more, if the Americans and Brits had been there, they would have spent more time protecting German women from being raped by Russian savages than anything else. They would have ended up shooting each other with the Russians.
Yep.
So I don't think people understand World War II at all.
No.
And of course they think that Russia, blah, 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 blah. Russia couldn't have fought a single battle without the weaponry and support of the Americans.
To the point where if we hadn't helped them, they would have lost the war by 1941.
Yeah, they would be speaking German to this day.
Yep.
But, you know, the Great Red Army, 22 million dead! 20 fucking 2 million dead! What they were doing, they were throwing people with catapults. It doesn't make any sense, does it?
There's a famous piece of footage shot by an American combat cameraman in Czechoslovakia. And the Russians had come through, and they were on this road, and the Americans had some German prisoners. And this young German woman came up to them, and she was wearing a uniform pants and a sweater. And she'd had the absolute hell beat out of her. She had a huge black eye, and she had her ID and some money. And she came up to the Americans. It's a silent film, but apparently she said, "Have mercy on me." And there's another clip of her sitting with the German soldiers, and then now she's smiling. And there's been an attempt to identify her. The cameraman's report, he just wrote German female soldier. He didn't write down her name, even though she had her ID. Nobody's ever identified her, but the Americans saved her after the Russians had their way with her, and it wouldn't occur to the vast majority of Russians to save a woman who'd been drafted, and you know,
not one of the I've looked for it. If there is a case, please let me know where I can find it. But I didn't find a single case of Russian soldiers stopping their comrades from committing the most savage atrocities on women, both enemy and friendly.
oh yeah,
They raped their way through Europe.
no, and they're doing it today.
It was a perk of the job.
They had an 80-year break, and then they did it again in Ukraine. They acted exactly
They're doing exactly the same manner. Exactly the same manner. So it has nothing to do with communism or not. This is Russia.
People are criticizing the Ukrainians for releasing footage that shows like this fucked up Russian soldier just kind of sitting there, and they send a drone in and blow him up. And they say he wasn't doing anything. And the Ukrainian answer is he's in our country.
Yeah.
He's in our country.
He wasn't doing anything here. He shouldn't be doing anything there. It's the same problem with the discussion here about illegals.
Mm-hmm.
But they said they were only going to deport illegals who committed crimes. Being here is a crime, you fucking idiot.
And they didn't say that. They said they were going to start with the
priority to
criminals. Yep.
Yeah, but in any case, being here in violation of our laws is a crime. And if they're on their second journey, it's a felony.
Absolutely.
So don't give me that shit. The same thing over there. The Russian soldier was doing nothing in Zaporizhia. Yeah, he was in Zaporizhia, asshole. And if you ask the people in the towns that went by who can still talk, because obviously there's a ton of people from Bucha to Donetsk who aren't talking anymore, except through their bones.
Well, what was the city that they leveled on? It was a port city. It was the first city that they leveled. What was it called?
Wait, it's in the south. Oh, for crying out loud. Melitopol.
Yes, there we go.
Melitopol.
And there were the estimates are they killed 50,000 civilians.
Yes, they talk about genocide in Gaza. This fucking sons of bitches. And they've erased entire cities with everybody in it.
Well, also it's a real genocide. They've shipped the Ukrainian children to Russia and forced them to speak Russian.
To be re-educated as Russian and eventually return as Russian soldiers.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, the basis of the arrest order for Putin, because it is, oh my God, this forcible deportation of children is a war crime, darling. Big one. A real one, not an invented one.
Yep.
So, fuck it. Anyway, let me do my little plea. Folks, hello there. I see that you haven't started tipping or anything yet. The good news is the system works. And it's been reported to me on several occasions now that if you click on support or on tips for the for the chat. You don't have to jump through hoops or have a wallet or anything, and you can make a payment with your credit card. And if your credit card doesn't work, a debit card will. So please do it. For members of the channel who like to come to VIP room and all the jazz, I managed to get Odyssey to extend 1 week as your former subscriptions expire. You will be sent a notification to renew. If you have already received that notification, you have another week to renew than so you don't lapse. This can be done again fairly simple uh, by the usual manner using a debit or credit card. So if you may, please do. And if you want to try the system anyway, I will not be opposed to it. If you still don't want it, you can still use quadrarum.com/support us to support us on this channel. But of course, this will not give you access to the VIP room and all that jazz. The only way you can do that is by retaining your status as a member in the channel, and that can only be done through Odyssey. We have no way of interfering in that process and say make a member out of somebody who isn't or whatever. So please double check on that so that we can go back to functioning as normal as soon as possible. It is vital that we do so. And of course, if you're watching in X and you or on X and you want to support us, you can do that by subscribing to at the Brother Lie. Is oh my God, a cup of Starbucks coffee every 2 months. No big freaking deal. So please do it. And you'll be able to participate in our spaces on Wednesdays by doing so. So, with that, I'm done with the notices. Thomas, is there anything we left unsaid?
Denmark is expanding the draft to include women. So now women have faced compulsory military service in Denmark.
Is that wonderful? By the way, what is the army in the world with the most women in its armed forces?
Say it again.
What is the country in the world with the most women in its armed forces?
No idea. Do you know?
The U.S., nearly 200,000. Is an interesting thing. And we're still discussing a number of things about that, and some things have merit. And I do think that Pete Hegseth is nailing it on the head
Oh, yeah.
with this. Um, I never liked women in combat. I never did. I confess that there is more than one consideration for me. One might argue that women in combat has to fulfill all of the demands that are made of men as far as physicality, stamina, resistance, um, because they cannot become at any time a charge to their comrades. Unfortunately, in this country, at one point, we lowered those standards so that more women could join special forces and other things. That's a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, that was just stupid. We ended up with fat Green Berets and fat Marines.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't want to offend Green Berets, men or women or trans. I don't care.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing is, I do have a special consideration, and it has to do with the survivability of the species and the nation. Child-bearing soldiers lost at war. It's not just one person we lost, it's generations to come. And I do believe that women can make an enormous contribution to the military without necessarily going to fight in a fucking trench.
Well, there's so many technological jobs now, such as piloting drones from inside the United States and things like that.
Hmm.
You can be in combat without being physically exposed to combat.
You
So,
can be in a combat zone. Well, they're not in combat; they're participating of the combat, but they are removed
yeah,
from it. Women manning drones from Qatar in the Iraq War, they were never a serious danger of harm.
yeah,
So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with a number of things. I'm okay with women being in forward bases. Uh, I'm not okay with women participating in infantry advances, for instance.
no, because I mean they're simply not strong enough to do it. Um, Infantrymen have to haul, 70 pounds of gear and then rescue a buddy who's been wounded,
Yeah,
and that's just not possible. In the Brits in World War II, they gave women combat jobs such as anti-aircraft defense around
yeah.
airfields, and those soldiers suffered almost zero casualties because the bombers
But
they were focused on the airfield and not
on the
on.
airfield,
Yeah,
and they saved a lot of lives and caused
exactly.
enormous damage to the enemy at the same time.
Yeah,
So
and
I do believe there is a role for them, but not combat. Fuck that shit, people.
yeah, not if they're going to be in the combat arms. I don't have a problem with fighter pilots, but at the same time, in both Trump terms, when he's come in, he's had to fire high-ranking female fighter pilots because their leadership ability is zero. They
Yep.
lead by screaming hysterically, and I'm not
Yep.
saying that that's how all women behave,
No,
but
no,
it's
no, no. That's not how all women behave. Um, Kelly is saying one of the B-12 pilots hitting Iran was a woman. I have absolutely no fucking problem with that. Um, Frankly, our pilots are safer than anybody else's housewife. Um,
absolutely.
but but my point is this: let's not make an issue out of it. The Democrats are wanting to make an issue out of it because they're stupid. There is a role for women. We have more women in our armed forces than any other country. Just keep them away from special operations
Yeah, and infantry.
and infantry and don't give me that shit. And there is plenty of jobs available that are as important as any other. And I wish uh, Hexeth uh, every success
Well,
in reversing this shit.
our aircraft carriers, for example, they're safer than they ever were before. You're not
Oh
going to
God,
see an American aircraft carrier sunk by enemy action.
no,
It's not going to happen.
no, no.
We don't have battleships anymore, so we're not going to have big guns blowing up. The ships that we have that do have guns, the guns don't have human beings inside them anymore.
No,
So
they're controlled with joysticks from inside.
exactly. So
Yeah,
you can have females all around the
yeah,
crews of those ships. It's like you said, okay, keep women out of. Okay, the Israelis have female special operators, but they serve as, for lack of a better term, assassins
yes,
rather than special like snipers, like people who kick down doors and spray the room. You don't have women doing stuff like that because that's very close to infantry work, and you just don't want women in the infantry. You don't want them doing ground pounder stuff because that requires a level of strength.
frankly, I want also to keep the casualties among women to a bare fucking minimum. They are what is going to produce the next generation,
Mhm.
and as such, we have to protect them.
Well, a couple of years ago, everyone was screaming that South Korea was going to die, and suddenly their birth rate just went through the roof.
Yeah.
the same thing's going to happen in this country. When things get really great, our birth rate's going to go through the roof again, and there's going to be a second.
Again, like it did several times before.
Mhm.
It all of the Malthusian projections of assholes who want to sell you snake oil. Oh my God, Elon Musk just came to mind with his dire warnings that we're dying. No, we're not. No, we are not. And what we're seeing is the reverse con of the population bomb.
Mhm.
Hmm? Early came up with the canard that by 1980 we were going to be so many we would have to eat ourselves
Mhm.
because the earth will not have enough capacity to produce food. Oh, how did that one go?
Yeah, remember those experiments where they would put all these mice in this giant cage
Yep,
with multiple floors, and they
hmm
would go crazy and cannibalize each other,
of
and
course. But because that's the earth, you see, there are no accidents, no earthquakes, no wars, no
and
illness.
it's the Earth is just a little building
In
where you
just a
can
little
see all the
building where we all
sides.
pile on top of each other. You know, the earth can sustain 10 times the current population.
And it's not going to get to that.
Of course not. And it can do that with today's technology.
Yeah, just imagine what things are going to be like when you and I are 100 years old.
You know, if Earth's population grows beyond that, we're going to have skyscrapers with hydroponic farms in them.
Yeah.
God knows what the technology is going to be. So, fuck all of these people. And the people who are telling you now that we're going to be depopulated are just as fucking stupid as
Mhm.
ever. All of them. The reason I mentioned Elon Musk is I do not forgive him because he should know better.
Mhm.
He should know better. He's an MIT engineer, a genius who can build a rocket, and he can't figure this shit out for the commodities. Ergo, he knows, and he's just lying on purpose. Because I don't know, uh, scared people will go for the American Party or whatever the fuck. Which, by the way, how much of the American vote did libertarians attract in the past, say, 30 years of elections? Never more than 1%.
Mhm.
Always less than 1%. How scared are you that a new libertarian party is going to somehow make big changes in our political
Can you imagine
universe?
the nutcases who are going to be running?
Can you imagine? The party of the random Ron Pauls and the Masseys and Oliver and the rest of the fucking idiots who think Iran should have nuclear weapons
Yeah.
because
No,
we're all free to do whatever we want.
it's going to be some Jew hating weirdo, and
Hmm
you know who's going to exactly say that the Iranian the mullahs should have had nukes, and
Yes,
they're going to get
and,
like
and
0.3% of the vote.
and we should eliminate the Fed and go back to bartering.
Yeah.
I want a chicken in exchange for my shoes.
Yeah.
Eh, They don't even understand the importance of having a stable currency with the same value from one corner of the country to the other.
No.
And tell me how you're going to do that without a central bank.
Well, okay, I used to be a coin collector, and it's like there was a period in this country where like every state had its own currency, and
Every bank,
every bank had their own currency. And
every fucking bank printed their own fucking currency. How much is it worth? I don't know. Can you imagine somebody from the bank of Coral Gables in Florida trying to buy something from a farmer in Shasta County, California?
yeah,
How much is that bill worth?
well,
I
okay,
don't know.
some people call 25 cents 2 bits. That's because back in the day they would take a gold dollar and they would cut a quarter out of it.
Yeah.
And that was 2 bits. A dollar
Yeah.
had 8 bits altogether. And
And we used to have the Spanish dollar as money in circulation, and to make change, people would cut it. So you have the quarter of 8.
yeah, no,
It's like, do they really want to go back to that? What are we gonna have? Pieces of a Kruger run, you fucking idiot!
yeah, no. I mean, they don't know. They don't know this. You know, people
No.
making these demands. They don't know that we already did all this stuff. We did isolationism. We did every bank having their own currency. You know, it didn't work. That's why we got rid of it.
And good riddance. Anyway, uh, for everybody out there, those of you who supported us, thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. Those who didn't, what the fuck are you waiting for? And those who are having trouble in Odyssey, uh, listen, it works. I had my own doubts last Sunday when I began to see the system, but now I know it works and it's easy, and there is no reason to not do it, frankly. So that's it. One pung, somebody learned something we said, but I don't know what it is. Um, oh, Musk can't run himself. Whatever party he pushes forward will be some wacko that would give Mandami a run for the money. Actually, that would make Mandami mayor. But no, it's. I don't think they're going to be effective at all. I don't see anybody running to this kind of shitty banner. And if you pick the banner of the Know Nothing Party, boy, you're starting with a handicap, a big one. So let them do whatever the fuck they want. It's a long time to elections, and by the time we actually have them, you know what's going to be more important? If we actually do another census counting citizens so that we can reapportion our representatives according to the number of citizens per district. That is going to be significant. This American Party bullshit is not. The one pump was the Native American currency, beads. Yes, we can go to that. Glass beads are easy to find. Everybody can. We're all millionaires. I'll tell you what, seashells. Anybody willing to walk on the beach for an hour will be a rich man. Idiots, all of them. So, thank you so much, Thomas. See you next week. For everybody else, we're going to be here tomorrow with the quad meet so that people can come on screen, and Tuesday at the VIP room. And thank you so much. Good night, all.